back. Oh yeah, alright. I'm over here on this side this time. I mean, I prefer to be over there where I was at. Only thing is today, yeah, like I said, we back. Um, I mean, you know how that go, man. You know what I'm saying? So I was inspired, and at the same time, I was just like taking my time. I was kind of like, going through the motions, dealing with the boredom, the monotony, um, the reflecting, all that. I think I dropped a voice note in between all that. And so, for those that know, like I don't really post those, but they're available. I went back in the archives though, cause some of them they link to the SoundCloud, and so I think that's where it originally started. And so, just warming up. Yeah, I was just troubleshooting with the audio, man, and just the whole rig, man. I was just troubleshooting with that, man. Got over the hurdles, man. Yo, the funny thing too, man, cause like how you could get lost in the sauce. So like literally, like when I was looking like 5 minutes ago, literally like 5 minutes ago, I'm like, dang, I'll take it too long, man. But just going over the the things you gotta check off on the clipboard. All right, cool, 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 go. So green light, and we green, man, and it's like last time I think which is why I dropped a voice note too, man. I had to like troubleshoot with it, but I actually didn't have like the brain energy for that. I ain't even look that way. Be honest with you, I'm like, once that shit kind of was like, all right, ah, damn, man, like I don't really know, what I'm saying, like, um, you know, where they even like look under the hood for this. So I could read the manual, but I'm not gonna do that right now. So I dropped the voice note in the middle of that. Finish wrapping up this book I was telling you about. I was telling you about that on the voice note. And matter of fact, like a little bit over more than a week ago, I remember like there was something else that I was talking about in regards to like Tamar, right, and Judah, right, and I guess we're gonna get right to that too, right, cause like I'm kind of freestyling. There's some things that I kind of want to show you, but I want to build off of that, and then I'm gonna hop into something else. It's gonna be a little all over the place, but whatever. You make perspective out of it however you can or however you will, right? If you so choose to, right? And so with Judah, right, and the lineage, right? I'm just getting to my Bible. Give me a second, man. It's something that I want to actually look into, right? And we know that Judah was one of Joseph's 12 sons, right? Um, but I don't want to be mistaken, right? I don't want to be mistaken, right? And you know, what kind of like came to mind, right? And so yes, yo, what is this whole thing over here? Come on, 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 come on. Genesis. All right, so we're gonna have to head over to Genesis 37 to 32 and 36, right? And so like I feel like actually flipping through the pages. Oh, look, I got it right here. Why not? Right? And so we gotta have it over to Genesis, right? So like that's the first book of the Bible, right? And so we land in Genesis 24. Now we start turning the pages upwards. 33, 39. Let's go back. 37, 12, right? Now let's see if I got in mind I could locate it. 37, 12, and 36, right? Now, mind you, I'm reminded of a few things, right? I had just finished completing the book, like I was telling you, right? And you might have noticed, I had a what was it? It looked like the thumbnail for Vigilant 550, right? Um, and so that book that I just finished reading, it's the title. I mean, I could have it wrong. I know it's over there. Um, but it's the 21 dispensable, I think, indispensable qualities of a leader, whatever the case is. And so, I just whatever, just to pass the time and whatever, you know what I mean. And I figure like the library is a great resource, so that was one of the books that I wound up picking up among others, right? And so it's just so many books to read, like it's endless. You know what I mean? Like just imagine from generation to generation to generation. Yet this book is not just a book of allegories, right? But we're gonna look at things probably from that lens if we so choose to, because I think I'm not sure if it was in a previous video or if I was doing it. Yeah, I think it was in the previous video, which was kind of like somewhat like of a voice note that I uploaded because I had the background with the family in it, right? And so let's go to over here Genesis, right? So chapter what is it? 37 and verse 32. I gotta turn the page, so I'm over here. His brothers now went to pasture his father's flock near Shechem. Israel later said to Joseph, "Your brothers are tending flocks near Shechem, are they not? Come and let me send you to them." At this he said to him, "I am ready." Sound like a good and obedient young child, right? So Joseph's the youngest at this point, right? And so you could imagine like sometimes how like when kids still have like that sort of kind of respect and bond with their parents where like a chore doesn't feel like a chore, like it feels like, oh, you're giving me a task, something that I could like show and prove that I'm worthy. Like they might not necessarily take it like that, but like they get all excited and giddy for the, you know what I mean, whatever like little chore or responsibility you gonna give them, right? So they could show like they're grown or they're competent or whatever it is, right? And so I'm not sure if that's his tone, but like you know, these are little things like playful things that come to mind when I'm reading the Bible, right? And so he's not a young child, but like at the same time he's an adolescent, right? And when you got older siblings, at the same time you can find yourself in that scenario, right? And so he said to him, "Go, please, and see whether your brothers are well. See how the flock is, and bring word back to me." So now his father, Israel, right? Jacob, right? He he sends Joseph to go check and tend to his brothers because they're tending to his flock, right? They're tending to his sheep, right? And so he sent him away from the valley of Hebron, and he went on towards Shechem. Later, a man found him as he was wandering in the field. The man asked him, "What are you looking for?" To this he said, "I am looking for my brothers. Please tell me, where are they tending flocks?" The man continued, "They have pulled away from here, for I heard them saying, 'Let us go to Dothan,' or Dothan." So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Now they caught sight of him from a distance, and before he reached them, they began plotting against him to put him to death. So they said to one another, "Look, here comes that dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and pitch him into one of the water pits, and he will say that a vicious wild animal devoured him. Let us see what will become of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from them. So he said, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Do not shed blood. Throw him into the water pit, into the wilderness, but do not harm him." His purpose was to rescue him from them in order for him to return him to his father. Now remember, they all had the same father but different mothers, right? So you could also just imagine, like, the type of relationships that they had. Like, they depended on each other as like brothers, but at the same time, like, that dynamic also kind of like introduces, like, which is why, like, later on when you read about it, like Joseph, he's concerned about his young brother Benjamin. They're all his brothers, but he's more concerned about Benjamin, right? And he sets him up through Benjamin, right? And so why? Because that was his actual blood brother in the sense where that came from, the same mother. They all had the same father. Now, I probably should have checked this out, or maybe I was under um, false impression. But I remember reading somewhere that it was actually Judah's idea to kill him, and so um, the passage I know for sure Reuben was the one who had the intention to save him, and so um, I wanna heading back over here, but then there's probably something down the line where, like, if Judah wasn't the one that said those words, because in the passage that I just covered, the only name that's revealed is Reuben, and I already know, like, Reuben had intentions to save him, but it doesn't say of whom the words were. Let us go. Hold up. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Now they caught sight of him from a distance. Before he reached them, they began plotting against him so to put him to death. So they said to one another, "Look, here comes the dreamer." I don't know. Maybe we should take a look at some of these passages, these marginal notes, right? It's not like I'm looking for like that bias theory or whatever. I was just probably under the false impression. It doesn't indicate who. Um, but either way, like there's this aspect of all of the tribes of Judah, all of Joseph's sons. There's also reflective in each and every one of us, right? And not for nothing, in Genesis, right? In Genesis, in the very beginning, first chapter, we can identify that God, as our creator, said, then God said, "Let us make man." This is verse 26 of the first chapter. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have in subjection the fish of the sea, and the flying creatures of the heavens, and the domestic animals, and all the earth, and every creeping animal that is moving on the earth." Right? That's in the 26th verse. Right? And so, I mean, I try to avoid this whole topic a lot of times because it's clear to me, but it's hard to kind of like define or describe or explain. And that's the whole Trinity, because like nowhere does it like explicitly say the Trinity, but clearly when you hear God, which is in the plural, um, speak, it says he speaks of himself as us, right? And so, like, it's hard to kind of like really describe that, especially when someone, is just like looking to kind of like, detract or take away or dismantle or, and it's not even so much, yeah, you want to be modest and humble, but you also want to be wise too. So, in certain scenarios, you just want to avoid that altogether. And just, you know, if you could, like, somehow, because it could be a contentious subject, somehow, like, touch on it without actually, like, getting into an in-depth trying to make a person. And we're gonna see an example of someone not in this same topic, but we're gonna see, something that happened last week, where it occurred where someone still had valid points. Both people had valid points, but like then you get into this whole like point of like you tip the scale, and sometimes people's emotions are kind of like a little off hinged or unhinged, and they could be combative, and they could be combative in nasty ways, and it could be verbal, it could be physical, you know with these discussions, like it could lead to that, and so you just got to be extremely mindful to be able to kind of like discern like what type of spirit you're dealing with, and that might not be obvious at so easily, depending on where you're at in this walk, because you can have a lot of zeal in the beginning of this walk, like you just awakening now, you're trying to get everybody to see what you see and what you're starting to understand or what God is sharing with you, and next thing you know, it's like you're getting pushed back, you meeting resistance, and you just you bump your head and you don't understand why. And so like there's some kind of like footage of something that took place last week. And I'm not sure where she's at. She didn't even really get into like the whole religious aspect of it, and that's why I'm gonna kind of touch on it. And so I'm happy to have the actual book right here, um, you know, right now, and in the sense of just flipping through the pages and just like you hear them pages, like it's something that just feels like comforting when you go back and back and back and you have these like moments of of rest. If I could just put it that way. And so I'm getting to you a little bit late. I also want to explain some things to you, right, that I probably should have said from like the onset of the video, right. And so like um I'm like a little hesitant. All right, we like almost 20 minutes in, right. So over the weekend, as you know, was Passover weekend, right. And that means different things to different people, and many celebrate it, many don't. And so that's up to you, your discretion. And literally, like, I found my way actually like in the place of worship, and I haven't been there in a minute. And so like I just advise people to be mindful, and I don't think there's any harm in that. And so I haven't physically been in church, and the times we live in, it's so easy to kind of like people are into all kind of forms of spirituality. And so um I've kind of like grown to understand that, like, there's a reason why we have this innate ability to worship, regardless if we like are conscious of it or not. And like that has led me down many paths to understand like that Christ is real, and there is a definite God. And so with that, um like it starts to like change your whole perspective on how to live life, and like what life is really about. And so like you wake up and you realize that this is a matrix, but even beyond that, like that's just the metaphysical way of explaining it. Like you actually have an actual adversary, right? And like God really, these are just like hollow words, because like his judgment hasn't been felt, but like God really ultimately judges, right? And so like it's a scary thing in many lives, for some people in an unhealthy dynamic, and for other people in a healthy dynamic. And so there's a healthy reverence where we do recognize this, and then we start to mature, and we take this into like you know serious consideration of you know how we're up against so much wickedness, and like the fear of disappointing God, and like also like your fellow love for your fellow like brother and sister in Christ, and so like hopefully. like you got some of that. Hopefully, like you understand like what drives a person, like in a way where you won't understand it until you have that somewhat of awakening, because until then they'll just appear to you and come to you off as crazy, and in reality, like they have had some kind of divine intervention. Now some have had that in aspects that have led them to the dark aspect of it, but it all still comes back to God, the devil, and ultimately how, because of that fact, God had to send forth the Messiah. Without that, we wouldn't have salvation. And so, like, that ultimately is what his name means. And so, um, God and his mercy, like, if you understand it, like, and so you know that, like, this was Passover weekend, and on a particular day back in history, Nisan 14, according to the Jewish calendar, that was Passover weekend. Christ, along with the rest of his disciples or apostles, they had what some deem as or they term or they describe or call as the Last Supper. And so at that, um, you know, Christ, although being king, he washed his servants' feet and all of their feet. And at that same um, supper, at that same dinner, at that same table, um, he also exposed that one of his disciples was going to betray him. That disciple ultimately was Judas, but he knew that, and he indicated it by describing what he would do, and so he gave him the bread, and so ultimately, um, when we move past that particular like scene, that scenario, or that account, I want to say, Judas is not a part of the 12 disciples, right? While they're in Gethsemane, he's ultimately with the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and they're on their way to go betray Christ. Um, and so, that was a little bit after, but it took place in the Passover, right? And so, at the Passover, that's where they had the bread and the wine, right? And he goes on to explain how it represents his body and his blood, right? And so this is where we come to understand that we're washed in his blood, right? And so after, he bears his blood and he bears his blood on the cross, right? And so um, hours later he would go on to go do that, but the wine and the bread were symbolic of that prophecy. And so this is what allows us to have, at this point in time, salvation and like communication through God, because like literally, like after you say your prayers, you always in Christ Jesus' name, right? After you say your prayers, right? And it's through him and his works and his deeds, and there's nothing that we can do that literally will grant us that, so that none of us could boast. Only Christ could boast, right? And say that. And so we've all been given mercy and grace, and those who've come to recognize that and witness that, and according to their conduct, although not perfect, they go on to not only, just live in accordance with God's will and promises and his laws and his just way, they go on to treat others and show them the same. And so um, on Passover weekend, that was that was ultimately the last time he was going to do that with his disciples. And so he goes on to explain to them, giving them like foreshadowing that in the future I won't be with you, but do this to remember me. And so he would be remembered and not forgotten. And in this system, it's the opposite. We typically remember a person's birthday, and so instead of remembering, yeah, obviously, like, when it comes to like funerals, that's also a thing. And, you know, um, there's people that are born and there's people that die every day. And so, funerals, they bring a lot of sentiments and, so does life and babies, right? So we're going to cover some of that. Like, you would think it'd be a joyous thing, but in reality, like, you know, I really can't say. You know what I mean? But I'm coming back to you with this video, and I had to give you that whole drawn out scenario simply because I was getting a lot of like spiritual warfare. I'll just put it like that. I was getting like a lot of spiritual warfare, and you know, my God, my father Abba, he told me to be still, and so this too shall pass as I was still, and I was just like, you know, processing things, introspecting and assessing things, and discerning, you know, what sorcery is this? What witchcraft is this? What is what medium are these energies functioning from? And the simple thing that I could think of, right, is to hold every thought captive, right? And so in my mind, I had to think about the more important things. And so with the Passover and the fact that I haven't been in a place of worship um, in exactly a year, to be honest with you, not today, but the day of, or somewhat close to. And so, it was very, at least for me, a controversial thing within myself. I had you know, internal strife, internal struggle, internal turmoil in some regards. And, a lot has to do with that whole, and I don't even know how to describe it because I want to be respectful, but you already know like how I serve it, and it's not so much to like, you know, make so much light of certain things. Is also to kind of like, in the same regard, you know, not overlook things, right? Not oversight things, right? In that regard, like just not look over, right? And so, you know, for some it's a fine line between like a minor offense or a big offense, and a lot of people at church hurt, and it's a sensitive topic. Like I can't say where you are as an individual when it comes to church, and when it comes, I know when it comes is as far as like the topic is concerned, it could be a very volatile, it could be a very controversial, and there's a lot of emotions in between all of that, and people get passionate, and so with this being Passover weekend, I didn't have time to entertain too many things other than the more important things. So holding every thought captive, I was like, I could get sucked into this corny ass narrative, or I don't even know if this is drama or whatever, like soap opera or nonsense. You know what I mean? Or I could, not lose sight of the fact of, you know, it's easy for many to lose faith. It's not that easy for many to endure and maintain um, in the faith, right? And so you can go between being hot and cold, right? And so, like, even within myself, I said, as I was explaining with the internal strife and the turmoil, like, like I'm 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 always attempting to be conscious of if whether I'm like cooling off, if I'm, at times I've even like fought against, like, or I've even thought or even considered what is cold and what does it look like, right? If you even if I've alluded or hinted to it, like maybe that'll give you a little bit of understanding. But either way, like I understand what it means to be on fire, like on fire for God, like really hot, right? And so like like you know, um, simply put, like uh, what comes to mind is like tea, right? And so like my preference is hot tea, and over you know with over the years, like accumulating all these gray hairs, I'm able to kind of like consume like really hot tea. Like I couldn't do that when I was younger. Like now, I'm not sure if like the palate or the roof of my mouth, like not to say like it's become callous or whatever the case is, but you know, at the same time, like it's mature to the point where it's not so sensitive. You know what I mean? Like you could eat a pizza and that shit'll burn the roof of your mouth. You know what I mean? It's just like you playing with that piece of flesh all fucking day, and it's sensitive, and it won't allow you. I won't allow you to enjoy yourself or enjoy what you might be eating or whatever the case is, right? And so like now, like I could sip my tea extremely hot. You know what I'm saying? And enjoy that. You know what I'm saying? And I'll sit there on my own man shit and I'll just analyze things, you know what I mean? I'll slow this crazy world down, right? I'll slow it all the way the fuck down if I have to. Like in my personal, you know what I'm saying? As I'm centering myself, right? And it's nothing against mantras or affirmations or anything like that. Like sometimes you have to like be so still where you can hear a pin drop, right? Like literally like you'll start to pick up on all kind of sounds, right? And so there's such a thing as white noise, pink noise, right? And even all of that sometimes could be so distorted and amplified that you can't even hear God because it'll be so loud, right? And then this is where you'll be triggered into like insomnia. You'll be triggered into like a paralysis state, right? And like literally like all of these things like have severe effects on like your central nervous system and like all of that. Like I'm not even trying to like act like I'm talking like on some expert shit, but I know it'll affect you because as time goes on you'll start to like get like some symptoms out of nowhere. You know what I mean? So it's important to actually pay attention to your body. And like there's this old adage where it's like, even an honest doctor, it doesn't go like that, but they'll even tell you like you'll know your body better than like a doctor. Like you'll know your body even better than what I'm saying. Like so the saying goes or something like that, right? I remember hearing that when I was younger, and so um my whole thing was like, all right, well, I'm still not even sure. So like, it's a game time decision, like whether I go or not, right? Even up to the day, right? Because one, I haven't had fellowship to the point where it's like, it's important to have fellowship because you may keep each other abreast of like certain like news and events or whatever might be serious or of concern, right? Now the only unfortunate, but it's human nature. The only thing is like within these dynamics, you got people like power dynamics, hierarchies, cliques, and things like that that start to formulate. And this is why the body's so divided, right? And so like Paul, I'm not gonna go to every scripture, but hopefully you studying to show yourself approved, and a lot of you have, right, from my observation. You know what I mean? And so, like, it's not, it's important that we keep that in mind. Like, you know what I mean? Like once you start to familiarize yourself through like the scriptures, and before you even know it, like it really starts to take seed and root in your heart, and out of the heart speaks the abundance of the mouth. So you'll find yourself reciting scriptures. There's so many people, they're like, yo, and I'm like, damn, that wasn't even just like a little old scripture. It seemed like you recited the whole page, word for word almost. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's interesting where the body's at now, and it has to do with technology, at least for me, if I want to say it in that way, simply because I feel like in certain regards now people, um, because everything is also out in the open, now people, that gives people the courage to actually like really like speak their faith in ways where even the subject might have been taboo. They might have had their belief system more in private, and when they get around certain crowds, then they kind of like suppress that. But like I feel like now, like what I'm saying, like people almost have like somewhat of an incentive, or what I mean. It's also like a good and a bad, you know, that comes with that. And so fellowship is important because we rely on these remote settings too much, right? And so being present is important. So going into the whole situation, I didn't even consider, um, you know, the remote approach to it. Other than if I was gonna actually like bake my own unleavened bread, and so because of circumstances, I still haven't done that. Although I I would love to do that sometime in the future, right? And so like to bake my own unleavened bread or like have my you know what I'm saying? Like, yo, it's crazy to like even finish saying that sentence because where we at with these, like, with the power dynamics and like, just the genders, like, you know what I'm saying? It just like it's a lot. It's so messed up. I can't wait to get to some of the things that I'm gonna get to, but I'm just kind of laying down some of why, like, I was out the way. You know what I mean? And so that was really mainly my focus, right? And so being present, and so like I said, it didn't even come to mind to do nothing remote. And so I dropped a voice note in between all of that. But even leading into it, I was like, yo, I probably won't even like. I'm gonna try to get to him maybe by like Sunday, fun day night. You know what I mean? But at some point, I kind of like was like, nah, I'm not in no rush. Like, say what just to say what. Like, some people just love hearing so talk. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like say something, but just to say something. So it's like, I'm compiling some things. I'm gathering some things. I'm gonna need some things to talk about, right? And I don't just wanna, share my private life and all of that, right? And so it was always that dynamic, and so I always leave y'all, hopefully because they so lengthy in the sense of like long form content, like what I mean. Maybe you might not digest that right away if you do get to it, and you get to it here and there, and then you start to kind of like piece it together, and then they gotta sit with you and how that work out. That's on you. You know what I mean. So you turn out into like catch up to it when you catch up to it, right? And so like I ain't gonna force feed nobody. In the meantime, like I gotta, understand my relationship with God and not lose that, and that's the most important thing to me, right? So my relationship with God, right, and then myself, and then with man, right, and so man, woman, right, and so children, right, and so um I get out of this exactly like how I foresaw it, right? Like I was gonna just stay out the way. We're gonna show to the commemoration. Um, it's gonna be myself. Um, like truly no jelly, no envy, none of that. Like I just, you know what I mean? And like it was a little interesting for me, and I don't even want to talk about it, but I do feel like the need to talk about it. I kind of wanted to talk about it on the voice note, but like literally, like yo, there was this like pulse, this energy that literally like shook things up a little bit while I was present. You know what I'm saying? And I know I wasn't the only one that felt it. You know what I mean? And like that wasn't even the first time, and that's another reason why I went down there because I remember one time like so I went to like along my journey, along my spiritual journey, man. Like you man, like this is why like it's such a thing for me. Like when I read Paul's words and he's like, like I'm summarizing, but like he's like it would bring me nothing but like joy and happiness to know that like one of his offspring, like one of his children, his underlings, his teachers, like like that they like have taken the faith and made it their own, like just as strong and as much of a believer as him, right? Something to that effect, right? And so like like what can I tell you? Um So it be like that with me, right? In a sense where it's like, which is why I always wanted to give a Bible study, but like it be in different capacities, so it never was like a straight through sit down like how I had with a brother named Boyd, right? And so like I was his understudy, right? And so he was the one who was kind of like grooming me along the way. Not him alone, but like he was pretty much like the last one, right? And he actually was a real soldier, right? And I learned a lot from him. And if he didn't extend his hand, then I probably wouldn't have had that privilege of like spending um at one point we were studying like twice a week, right? And I've had other um definitely like teachers or people that I was under, right? And so but with him, like with him, everybody's different, right? In their own regard, right? So that's kind of what I was saying, right? And like with some of these situations, like they get all like, like with human nature and whatnot, right? And so you know, there's always people that it's almost unescapable, like you know, and this is where pride comes in, right? And you know, and this is where like you got to be mindful because a little bit of leaven ferments the whole bread, right? A little bit of pride like goes a long way, so it's important because it's dangerous and we got to be mindful of it. But like literally, like at the core, that's what narcissism is, right? And it appears and rears its ugly head in many forms and shapes and fashion, but it's also like grounded and rooted in the flesh and it's carnal, right? And so here you have Passover weekend, right, where he tells you what his flesh is, and his flesh is pure because he wasn't, he was doing the most humbling act, which was laying his life down. And the reason being is because none of us, well, this is what Satan accused Job of, but none of us like are that loyal to God to that degree. And so, um, even 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 Job didn't do it perfect, right? Even Job, that's somebody who tried to maintain his integrity, and in doing so, that was actually kind of like, if I understand it, even remotely close to how I've come to understand over time. That within itself was a form of him, kind of like being more righteous than God in a sense, right? And so, um, the only one who could do it was God Himself, and then that gets into that whole controversy, who's God, and so we just covered a little bit of that Trinity. And, it's not ducking that conversation, but it's just like some people just like want to put a limit or some kind of capacity on God. Like what's so hard to understand? Like God is unfathomable. Like what I mean? He reveals some of Himself, but we would never even be able to comprehend Him. Like there's people that and this is why data is so important because there's people that they'll go through great lengths to get all kind of knowledge and research up on a person and still feel as if they could like dictate certain things about you know or know how that person is gonna behave or whatever. And so I wasn't sure what I was gonna do, if I was gonna go or not. And I'm like, nah, man, I'm gonna go, right? So I wanna go, and I seen some familiar faces, and that was the first time that I actually participated. Well, nah, that was the first time in that congregation, right? And so I've been there before, but I actually got that a similar response like many many years ago, many years ago. Maybe some may recall, maybe they won't recall, but there was one time where like I had a opportunity to speak, and there was this like overwhelming response that, when I come to think about it, was somewhat similar to a little bit of the energy that I experienced over the weekend. Right now, the one on the weekend was probably, and this is the thing, like both of them, like unless you just want to deny them, and I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. Both of them literally like were powerful to the point where I can't tell you which one was more powerful than the other because they literally both of them were powerful. And for anybody to go against that, literally like it's just confirmation to me, right? And so like literally like yo, it's crazy. I had this kind of revelation like literally like as I'm having this well, this is pre-recorded right now, but as I'm live, right? And so like I tend to go off on tangents, but I mentioned because I thought, or maybe I was like, I might have got it misconstrued or confused or whatever, but I thought that it was Judah's idea to do that to Joseph, right? And so I gotta look into it, but I'm gonna keep going, right? And so Reuben was the one who showed compassion, right? And let's just keep reading because I see Judah does something else though. And so, as soon as Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph. Hold on. Let's go back. Let's go back. Come on now. Let us kill him and pitch him into one of the water pits, and we will say that a vicious wild animal devoured him. Then let us see what will become of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from them. And this is what I was kind of talking about, where, like, you see now, at least with this technology, like, he's doing the right thing, but he's not fully showing that he's doing the right thing in the front of all of them. Like he not talking down. He's still part of the plan. Only thing he got a whole different plan to kind of sabotage they plan, and they don't know that, right? But he don't want to look too righteous, or he don't want to look. However, he don't want to look. Maybe he kind of timid. He don't want to like. You know what I mean? Maybe he know he gonna get too much pushback, so he knows maybe that right then and there is not the time to actually reveal his true sentiments. Who knows? But he not really on board with the plan. We don't know who said it. I thought it was Judah. I could have been wrong. Maybe I am wrong, right? But like, I'm it's kind of gonna be long drawn out, man. I'm hopefully gonna be a little bit more efficient with this though. And so like here we see Reuben in the sea, right? And he's like, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from them. So he said, "Let us not take his life," right? Reuben said to them, "Do not shed blood." So now he's showing like like he got some good in him, but like all his brothers is like damn near wicked, right? And so since Reuben was the only one to establish himself as different from the other ones, who am I? I'm not trying to jump to conclusions, but I'm gonna have to wonder how hyped Judah might have been in that whole argument, right? Throw him into the water pit in the wilderness, but do not harm him. His purpose was to rescue him from them in order to return him to his father. Remember, that's where we left off, right? And that's what we were talking about, fathers, right? And I'm on the bike and I'm talking about the propósito, right? And I think, you know what I'm saying, like I think um I think a lot of people, a lot of women get this whole feminism thing misconstrued. So I'm gonna try to like get to some of that because I was talking about it for a good, like, wow, how leading into this week. So I think this is the third week, right? Going into the fourth, we just completed the third week, right? And so I waited because I'm like, I'm getting all of this like spiritual attack coming at me, and I'm like, I'm listening to God. I'm turning to God, right? And there's times where like I might read a lot, and there's times where it's like I might not read a lot, and I'm no different to each and every one of y'all. There's times that I pray, and I'm in depth and in a deep one, and there's other times where it's like I might rush it. You know what I mean? There's other times where I do it throughout the day. There's other times where it's like I might not even pray before I go to sleep. You know what I mean? And these are all bad habits. You know what I mean? That you want to be mindful of, right? Because like we gotta be vigilant, right? And so like going through the motions, right? And so like there's gonna be different times in your life where you're gonna be stronger, and there's other times where you might be weaker, and the enemy's always looking for the opportunity when you're weaker, right? And so we gotta be mindful of these things, and just like it's important to like be your own mascot, but also like have like you know, you know, you know, along in addition with reading the word, but like fellowship, right? Which is what I'm trying to get to. And so a lot of us opt to do this pretty much like online, due to the convenience and the technology. But like previously, like it would be within a congregation community, right? And I was talking about this in various different aspects and dynamics, right? And so literally like I made my way over, and at that point like I'm probably not gonna post something, like I'm just gonna really just dedicate my time to like getting close to God and try to understand you know um what took place um you know at that time, why it's still important and relevant, how is it important and relevant to me, how could it strengthen me, draw me closer to God, be mindful of the things of God, and you know just on the lookout for his return, right? And so, um, I get into like a real conservative, reserved kind of place, right? And I'm not doing too much other than simplifying my life and slowing it down, right? And so, you got the whole world that's spinning, and you know, cash, everything that rules. And so it's like, I'm out the way. And so I know the King of Kings that does rule. And so it's important that I keep that in mind, right? In the middle of all of these distractions or things that might try to like pull and grab for my attention, things that might not be important, things that you know, at this moment are certainly not as important. And so all of that could just fade to the background, and let me just focus in on this, right? And I come out of it thinking to myself like, all right, I'm gonna try to post on, at least Sunday, the tail end of the weekend. And I'm like, matter of fact, nah, it's not even the tail end of the weekend. Like that's yeah, that's the tail end of the weekend. But I already know like the weekend ends on Saturday, and so like I don't want to do that on Saturday Sunday because like I don't want to like do anything other than just think about like God, right? And so I know Sunday is the end of the weekend, but it's also like the start of the week, pretty much, right? And I'm saying to myself, um, nah, let me just let the whole weekend, let me just get out the whole weekend. And so that brings us to today. And so at some point earlier today, I checked and I noticed, oh, I could talk about something. So I'm gonna get to that, and I was supposed to get to that first, right? But I kind of wanted to highlight, like, you know, and especially because what took place, what I'm saying, like, um, was that the Messiah died for each and every one of our sins, right? And yet he showed human-like qualities, and he was human, right? Now God is not human, but we're made in His image, and we get a lot of, you know, qualities that because we're made in His image help us relate to Him, right? And so a thought that came to my mind was jealousy, right? And so a lot of people won't recognize that there's also a healthy form of jealousy. And then this is where I insert God into the conversation, right? Right? This is where he just like when it comes to anything else you can say about that, like why not start there, right? Like straight obvious, like you know what I mean? Like and so I wanna sit with that, right? I wanna think about that in the sense of um man, I hate when things just kinda like flashing in and out of my mind. let me um let me try to get back. Let me try to center myself real quick. Now you insert God into the conversation. even if you decide that you don't want to insert into the conversation, like he's the most obvious, right? Unless you want to be a disrespectful atheist, right? And so you don't care. And so it's not to disparage the atheist, right? On your truth, right? And so you get to the point where it's like you have all of these ideologies, right? And I was talking about that, and I was discussing that. Not at great lengths, but in many different facets and aspects, like these things were considered, right? And back to jealousy, like it could be an ugly thing. I think jealousy and envy do, in many regards, like almost like peanut butter and jelly, right? But they're not the same, right? And at the same time, like you know, we hear about God being described as a jealous God, right? Um, and that's like a human emotion, right? But his is a healthy form of jealousy, right? And so it's so that he doesn't lose you because he doesn't want to lose you to the enemy, right? And so this is a custody battle, and it's something that I've spoken of many, 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 many times. So whenever you get real worked up about me, like, or what I say, or what I don't say, or what I do, or what I don't do, like just be mindful. First of all, I'm not your idol, but like be mindful that, like, you know what I'm saying, like ultimately this is a custody battle over your soul, and like I'm not doing anything other than like trying to win souls, but not trying to win souls for the enemy. You know what I mean? If that's not apparent, you know what I mean. So it's like trying to trying to win souls from the enemy, trying to win souls from going to the enemy, right? And things like that, right? And so I'm not alone, and like literally, like it's a whole body, and it just circles back to what I was talking about, but more pointing what Paul was talking about, like the eye can't act like the eye's better than the hand, and like you know what I mean, like the hand can't act like it's better than the feet, and all of that. Like this is all, and this is why like Christ was perfect, and so we're not called to be perfect, right? Only He has that. Only He could wear that. That's why He's King of Kings. Like nobody's close. Anything is not even an imitation. Like you wouldn't even want it. Like literally, like straight up and down. Like, and so this is when you understand that, then you understand like the depth and why like the Messiah is the Messiah, and like He becomes that, like that real. You become that. I don't even want to say fixated, but in a healthy way. Like you understand like the levels of why like you run everything by him and why he's so important. And yo, like literally, like I could be mistaken, but in that same Last Supper, that's where Mary's crying, right? And she's like, bearing all right before him, right? And Judas gets mad, why? Because of the whole perfume, right? And we can talk about how she got the perfume, right? But here she is, and we done spoke about this. I've been on a bus talking to you about this, right? And so there's times where I touch your nerve, and then like I forget, right? But over time, I see that stiff neck starting to kind of like, you know what I'm saying, not be so stiff so much, right? And so, like literally, like you know, that hard heart starts to kind of like melt a little bit, right? And normally that happens like in your quiet time, right? And so it's important that you learn to like kind of shut everything down, like certain shit, like you know what I mean, like stop the room from spinning, right? And that's this matrix, right? And it's like you know I come out of that, and I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna, cause I was feeling like the spiritual warfare that was kind of making me feel this pressure to like say something. It's like say what, you know what I mean? Like what haven't I told you? You know what I mean? Like at this point, like, but I understand. And so, like, there's times where um we all forgetful, right? And you know, it's important to call these things back to your mind, right? And so he tells his disciples to do this in remembrance of him. He's not even asking for too much. He's like, yo, just do this one time a year. You know what I'm saying? You're not even asking for too much. Like, like in a lot of ways, like you don't understand, like how deep that is. Like my mind goes in because like it's almost like I'm coming from, and this is important. Like this is what I'm saying. Like people get mad when you talk about like you know like you know pro life, right? And so like I get it. Not all of us is gonna be parents, and not all of us should be parents and things like that, right? But some people actually lose the joy out of that, and they won't speak on it, right? And you know, like they'll get mad. And it's like you got this thing about what? Like how did you get here? Like somebody gave you life, right? And so this whole ongoing conversation is it, and it's like clearly that it's for procreation, right? Yes, it's meant to be enjoyed, but clearly it's for procreation, which is why when we go back like what is it, a week or two, like I'm literally talking about this whole because you're talking about so masturbation is the opposite of procreation, right? And so you know it's a serious problem, it's a disease, right? And so why is this behavior exhibited instead of it's important to shame the person, right? But in some regards they could get to a reprobate mind that shit don't even matter. Like there's been like countless creeps that been caught in public doing that. Matter of fact, I think there was something in the news cycle from like either last week or the week before. You know what I'm saying? And like there's even like you know what I mean? Like from unknown motherfuckers to like celebrities who had to contend with that, right? And even just the other day, I might have even been speaking about it, right? How it's not satisfying whether you're a man or a woman when it comes to that, right? Like, and so like like when you get to the point where and like that's an example of like having a reprobate mind, right? And so like you know it's not to encourage that type of behavior because it could lead down that type of behavior, but then trying to understand like yo, I ain't start my engine in a minute and I don't like 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 understanding like you know that without consistent like use, you know what I mean? Like you know without using your muscle, like there's atrophy that come with that, right? And so you know you don't want to get into that bad behavior of fapping, and then at the same time, Paul tells us to deaden it. He doesn't tell us to cut it off, right? He just tells us to deaden it, but there's good reason why he tells us to deaden it. And so like I'm not all the way pushing back on what he's saying, and I'm not all the way advocating. It's the same thing that I've been saying, right? Whether it's and these were his words, right? Like in the sense of like if you single, like why are you looking to get married, and if you married, why are you looking to be single? And so this whole dichotomy, this cognitive dissonance, all these big fancy fucking words for this confusion that lives inside of our flesh, right? And that's warring with our spirit, right? And a lot of that is what devices that cater to our flesh, right? And so these are things that are part of this spiritual attack, right? And they happen on a subconscious level. They happen on subtle levels. Sometimes they're overt, and those are the ones who are quick to take the bait, right? And then other times it's subtle, and the reason being is simply because, um, you know, those are the ones who don't easily take the bait, or the type of bait that they take, you know what I mean, might be different, you know what I mean, from the other rest of the type of bait that most people take. And so the enemy literally like he's out there and he's trying to ultimately have you surrender your soul to him, snatch your soul. and he's gonna do that through drawing you away from God, and because it's so critical that you stay near and dear, close to God, that he's gonna have to be very cunning. And so, along your journey, you'll start to recognize the spiritual warfare. I don't know who that is. We're gonna send them the voicemail. And so, let's get back to task, right? And so, I just kind of want to speed through this a little bit more quicker, right? Um, so the spiritual warfare, right? Then they sat down to eat. Hold on. Reuben said to them, "Do not shed blood. Throw him into the water pit." Throw him into the water pit in the wilderness. This water pit in the wilderness, but do not harm him. His purpose was to rescue him from them in order to return him to his father. So as soon as Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his robe and the special robe that he wore. And they took him and threw him into the water pit at that time, and the pit was empty. There was no water pit in it. Then they sat down to eat. When they looked up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying labdanum, gum, balsam, and resinous bark, and they were on their way down to Egypt. At this, Judah said to his brothers, "What profit would there be if we kill our brother and cover over his blood?" Oh, look at that. So, Judah actually distinguishes themselves as one of the ones who's able to reason, right? Because at one point they seen blood, right? Because why? They got jealous, right? But then again, here I'm explaining to you how we're made in God's image. Here I'm explaining to you how, hold up, wait, God could identify with being jealous, but not the type of jealous that his brothers exhibited. That's the type of jealousy that you and I can identify with. No, there's a healthy jealousy, right? And so this is how Joseph was rescued, right? That type of jealousy, right? And so Judah, he's like, what's the point of killing him? Why? Just because we want to be jealous? That's a weak emotion. Like, why kill him, right? Nah, let's not kill him. You know what I'm saying? He's like, if anything, let's sell him for profit, right? Ain't no profit in killing him, right? Reuben's right. Come on now. Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and do not let our hand be upon him. After all, he is our brother, our flesh. So they listened to their brother. Now, ironically, I don't know if I'm just bugging, but the Ishmaelites also is brothers. In a weird way, right? And so, um, and so I'll leave it there for now, right? Because as I read that, that gets into like where we actually began, and then I want to cover some of the things that were on the voice note. That was the best one. A lot of them, they don't even be on. A lot of them I don't even post them, right? So hopefully this is edifying. Hopefully y'all understand, like what I mean. Um, you know, simply that this is to foster a relationship, with your heavenly Father, right? And for me, it's a joy to like in Malachi, right? To have them return back to the Father, right? And so, um, feminism, along with all these other ideologies, is in the way, right? And so, um, before we get into that, I'm gonna take a little detour, but I want to ask ChatGPT a question. Hey, Chat. We are currently in the fourth wave of feminism. See, now I didn't want to ask ChatGPT this shit because I was talking the other day and I say a lot of shit that's not true. And some shit that's true, right? So, believe in none of what you see and half of what you hear. Whatever, you know, it's different strokes for different folks. But in reality, um, I did not want to ask ChatGPT this question. Why did I not want to ask ChatGPT? Because it is, and I don't know how I would know this, but for me, we are beyond the fourth wave of feminism. It has to be somewhere, you know, what comes after 4 or 5, right? And so it says we are currently in the fourth wave of feminism. The wave is characterized by its focus on intersectionality. Like they be just making them fucking words. Like I can make up words. Like what? Pardon my language. Pardon me. Pardon me. Addressing issues like gender-based violence. What is that? Pay inequality, healthcare access, and rigid social norms. It emphasizes inclusivity, uplifting marginal voices, and uplifting marginal voices. Okay. And leveraging technology for activism. Let's see what else it say. It say, yeah, let me get this on. It's probably on mine. It say, what are your thoughts on the evolution of feminism, right? And so I'm talking about it. Thanks for asking. Honestly, I don't know enough about it. I think it's a weird ideology, but on a voice note, I wound up actually like talking about the Exo Squad thing that I was talking about, and how um I think that's why I first seen a Skrillex, right? So that's a particular haircut. They, whatever, styles and trends, they come and go, whatever the case is. But I want to say when this chick Kesha was doing her thing, right? Um, Hopefully she's still doing her thing, however that looks like. You know what I mean? Um, but like literally, like around that time, like I felt like it was way more popular. But even before that, like I was explaining, the first time I seen it was in the cartoon, so I didn't even know that, right? And so in that cartoon, right, the way and the reason why I'm explaining this is because um patriarchy, right? And it's not so much patriarchy, it's just the way the true living God, the God Almighty, right? The grand creator, how he designed and ordered things, right? So it's God, Christ, man, woman, child, right? And so children come from not just women, they come from men and women, right? Children later grow up, right? And they grow up to become men and women. Grow up to become me and you, right? Like, and so, you know, there's like a circle of life, and whether you opt to have kids or not, like, it's also part of the pattern that created life, right? And so ultimately, God, the grand creator, he created life, right? And so, there's so many ideologies, and a lot of people ultimately just suppress that fact, right? So they try to dismiss the Bible, discredit the Bible, and when you have certain type of like agendas that take place, like this attack is on a broader scale, and hence you have this matrix, right? And if you ever find your way out of it, right, obviously in the matrix there's the ultimatum, and it's just two, and it's the red pill and the blue pill. Now when it comes to this, like literally, like people get mad when you hear about how there's just one way, but you can't get out of the matrix with the blue pill. And so just like Neo cracked the code, like same thing ultimately is like how everything goes back to Christ. Right? Now there's a lot of things that could be true, right? And they have a semblance of truth, but they're not rooted in truth in the way that Christ is rooted in truth, right? And so you have all these like spin-offs, right? And that's just natural, right? That's just how, like, if he's the source of life, like that's just how natural how life is. Like it branches off, right? And so, like, there's a whole nother conversation to take into consideration. Um, and so it's important that we understand like the rudiments of it, right? So what took place was the Passover, right? And so Christ came to save the Jews, but later on, Christ he passes the torch not necessarily to one in particular person, but through who? Through Paul, right? Who in many regards is responsible for contributing like most of the New Testament, right? And that only happens with his Damascus Road incident, right? If he doesn't have that divine intervention with him and God on that road, I'm sure God fulfills you know, his purpose however he so chooses, but that's the medium. And ironically, in a person who, guess what, was persecuting Christians, right? And so when you come up with your controversies about how, um, the Bible was flawed and man wrote it and King James was a homosexual and he was a faggot and, oh man, I might have to kind of like fix that word because then I won't be able to post it. Man, I don't really even want to, I got to make sure alright, so, I want, and so like with King James at that time, like literally like, I don't know if he was, I don't know if he wasn't, but I know people try to bring that up as a fallacy of the Bible, right? Or to point out the hypocrisy of it, perhaps. I'm not sure, but to talk down on it, right? And so the fact of the matter is, like, God considers that activity um, a sin, and yet He lumps it with the other sins as well, right? And so, a lot of that has to do with the pattern, and that's just the way that I understand it. So I explain it in the most simplest way that could be understood for anyone who wants to refute it. And so, like literally, like you know, that creates controversies. Just to put it mildly, right? It creates controversies, and to put that mildly, um, then you delve into like, a whole man. You get into a whole gray area, right? And you get into some like need to establish truths, and then this is where you know truth becomes the enemy or becomes weaponized, right? And so, like God, although He represents truth in Psalm 119 verse 160, it says His word is the essence of truth, right? He doesn't necessarily use that truth to like condemn you. Instead, his adversary tries to do that because he knows who God is. And yet he goes against God because he wanted to be God. In his pride, he thought of himself more than what he actually was. Now, nowhere does it say that God created Satan and Satan created music. God created through Christ. He created everything, and so He created good and evil, right? But Satan and his pride turned to evil, and his pride was only exacerbated by the fact that I'm not sure to describe him as a type of archangel, but he was one of God's sons, right? So he was an angel, and within their angelic um, hierarchy, there's ranking, and he is described in Ezekiel, and he's given a lot of power in terms of like beauty and in terms of like attributes, right? And one of them is the ability to sing. It talks about him having natural pipes to sing, right? And so a lot of people, and it's plausible reasoning behind it too. They somehow come up with the conclusion that he created music, but I beg to differ simply because when I look at David and his musicianship, his priesthood, um, and like his lineage, like literally, like he, and not just David, like when you go through different accounts in the Bible, like even with Moses, like Song of Moses, like music has its instrumental role in all of this, and so um, you know, for me personally, it's hard to separate the two. They go hand in hand, and so um, you know, Paul, going back to Paul, he said that we should greet each other, right? So going back to fellowship with psalms and hymns, right? These are forms of music that are for worshiping, right? And when David um, was always a man after God's heart, after constructing the temple, right, through Solomon, which is something that I gotta kind of go back and read and brush up on because it's a little sketchy, but like he ordained, right, like a priesthood, and they had trumpets, and you know out of the brass they made a lot of instruments, and literally like there was also this level of like musicianship and also like this kind of hierarchy, right, in regards of like 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 the trumpets were exclusive to the priests, right, and the Levite priests at that. Now, mind you, the trumpets also signify, or they gave the war cry for like war, right, and so um and I'm not even claiming to know all of this like as far as like all these multi languages and whatnot, but like the trumpet in Hebrew is the shofar, right, and so like um that was a different time, but like even in modern times, like the last 100 years or 150 years, like literally like they would send out you know before even like the brigade in certain regards, like you had like a whole line, and like they literally like would sound the alarm, right, and so music has a way of like somehow being so universal, right, and who created the universe, right, and so I remember when I was talking about like you know from my understanding you can't hear sound, and yet like sound is what reverberates, right, and so within that, like it's this creation that takes place, right, And so, what was the catalyst, right, of this Big Bang? If indeed there is a Big Bang, was a Big Bang, like, what was the catalyst, right? So, you know, um, sound is something where when when I think about it, even Paul, when he describes them speaking in tongues, he said that they understood each other, that it was not like the language that they were speaking was not intelligible, not unintelligible. I want to say it was intelligible, right? So they were able to perceive and understand each other's different language. And how is that possible? Simply because the spirit was there. The spirit was involved in that account, right? And so the spirit is very real, right? And so you know what I'm getting or what I'm not getting is what I should have emphasized, right? And so the fact of the matter is, right? Don't let me be facetious, right? And so um I'm dealing with the spiritual warfare and where it's coming from. I mean, it has to do with all these ideologies, right? So sometimes in my voice notes, you might hear me like try to really like reason with myself, right, and try to understand these things, right? Because like ultimately, like I'm still more concerned of being a Christian, right? And it's not. I don't even like describing it like that. Keeping God's word is really what I want to say, right? And so, you know, it's hard to do that, but the fact of the matter is, when you got the accuser of the brethren, they want to somehow single out individuals and say, you know, who is like really, about it and doing it and not. And in reality, like this is why I haven't got to certain videos yet, because I said my ministry is not about going and scouring the internet trying to like see who to criticize, who not to criticize, who to say who and who to idolize. And nah, we not doing all of that, right? But we gonna get to some of that, right? Cause it's it's not to be a complainer, but it's a thing for me to have to do a reaction to somebody else's reaction. Like it's saturated. If you know what I mean, but I like some of the things I'm about to share, so I don't mean no offense. And it took a little. I had to get a little creative and think like how I'm gonna do this, right? And so like I haven't rushed to do it. You know what I mean? I'm being respectful. It's fair use, fair use. If somehow while I'm scrolling, you pop up, um, I mean, they done turned me into some ugly ass meme at one point, right? You know what I mean? I know where that stems from. And so this is really shady out here, in the sense of like, these YouTube streets and like how people go about garnering and like traffic and I want to talking all of that. And I've kind of matured to the point where it's like I understand it a little better, not to take it personal, but this stuff starts to kind of like have an effect in this augmented reality. So, like, while I'm getting bombarded with the spiritual warfare because I'm supposed to um somehow conform to how people perceive how an interaction is supposed to go, right? And so you got all these people who chime in with their perspective or how they would do this. And this is why I never really like, as a man, you kind of like phase that out when it's like your time. Because when you get hyped and you see something that you want to approach, you like nothing else matters. So, like sometimes, you might not be self-aware. You might be too self-aware in that interaction. So it's important to be balanced, right? And so it's hard when all of these women is like unstable, confused creatures, and they busy like taking all of these information from all of these different resources, but they won't listen to their man though. They won't listen to their man. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like the chick all confused. You know what I'm saying? She getting advice from over here. She got her emotions telling her this, and she got experiences that made her feel some type of way, and all of this. You know what I mean? And you know, it's a different world, right? And trying to meet the world standards, right? Well, have you all discombobulated and fucked up, right? And so you get to hear some, really young women that know it all, and then you hear some humbled old women, right? Then you hear some proudful old women, and oh, it's not even getting at the women, you know what I mean? But I could only do this from a male perspective, so I'm sure it applies, right? In different ways. You tell her how, it resonates with you, but like this is how it resonates, and it resonates for both genders. To be quite honest with you, you know what I mean. But I could only give it from my perspective, which is a male perspective, right? And so, you know, taking my own advice, like you know what I'm saying. So whenever I have those feelings that arise in me, right? Because I might see something, I might just get a little, you know, you know, I don't know. I might let stupid shit come into my mind, right? And I might start thinking things that maybe my flesh might want, maybe not. You know, maybe I might just not be thinking things through. You know what I mean? We live in a hypersexualized world, and so it's like, you know, as always bombarded. You know, you know, females they hardly leave anything to the imagination, and like as men, like you don't even your imagination is always ready, right? So that also creates this kind of like I mentioned saturation earlier, but it creates this adverse like desensitized effect. You know what I mean? Because you overly stimulated. Like naturally your mind's gonna go there even if you don't show me all of this, right? And so like my mind is already hardwired to go there, but then when you crank that shit all the way to fuck up, like it also has a way of having an adverse kind of reaction, right? And I can only say that because like there's no reason why, you know what I mean? I don't know how prevalent it is, but you know, as a young man to be experiencing like some things that are common for maybe a gentleman my age or older, right? And so, I mentioned about like, starting my engine over, you know what I mean? Like starting it all over. Like not starting it all over, but like, every once in a while turning my engine on, right? And then you get the extra churchy people, they gotta come out of nowhere and it's like now you get a whole masturbation video. Like, and I gotta say this because it's not like it's not true, right? So we live in this technology based like world environment, right? And it's easy to kind of like spy on people, right? And so you really don't have no privacy, right? And so it's like I believe like it's obsolete, you know what I mean? But I'm not in agreement with that. I do believe like people should have privacy, you know what I mean? But then again, you know, there's a lot of people who push back. I don't know if they feminists. I don't know, but there's always like different ideologies, right? And so you don't have to be a feminist to think that way, right? And so you could just be a nosy motherfucker, right? Or you could just have a monitoring spirit, or whatever it is that you want to come up with, right? Whatever, it's just human nature. Whatever it is, right? So it's like I say this because I'm thinking to myself, right? Like, damn, if I can't even have a private life, then I'm not saying I should do an OnlyFans, and I'm not saying I even got any fans. I'm just saying like, shit is hard out here, and literally like I need to like kind of like somehow, um, and so you'll have people that'll try to tell you for having these are like normal anxieties, right? That you're not having faith, you're not believing in God, and it's like I'm like, yo, listen, man. I mean, you know, I don't want to sound like an ingrate. I don't want to start murmuring and complaining, but I also know like there's a certain way that life is realistically better. I want to say it like that. I'm not getting caught up with no like illusions, like no imaginary shit. I'll be very pragmatic and practical, right? And so I don't like to fill my head up with stupid shit. And then that moment of having so much idle fucking time, like you susceptible to that. You might even succumb to it. And so it's like I'm like, damn, bro, I don't want to fill my head with dumb shit. Now, um, at the same time, like, I'm trying to figure this shit out, right? And so, I spoke on it on the shadow work to do, right? I got some shadow work to do, right? I said I had some shadow. I said I had some shadow work to do, right? Now I said it the way I said it for a particular reason. I said it that way just cause, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not feeling myself, but like that's just the way I said it. You know what I'm saying? Now if you understand me, you know why I said it that way. Now it's important that you understand me, right? And I need you to understand me in a way that the whole rest of the world don't understand me. But the only way for that to be accomplished is if we have privacy. Because then you would have me in a way that the rest of the world didn't. And so you would know me in a particular way that the rest of the world doesn't. And so it's important for me to meet that requirement, right? And for you, you don't have to understand that, right? Like the world don't need to understand that. The world don't gotta meet my requirements. Like, what the fuck is wrong with this delusional clown, right? And so it's like this is my internal dialogue so that I could feel the best version of myself so that I could carry on and be what I need to be in terms of like what I provide when I'm working at my optimal level type of shit, right? And so I'm thinking a little bit too much, right? But not really though, right? So I kind of was rehearsing. I was going over some old songs and shit, and I get to a song that I made called Song 103, right? And I remember the last time I heard it, like it was cringe for me, right? Cause I'm like at the time when I made the song, I actually made the song while I was here. I want to say, but I don't think I finished it till I actually like had relocated. And at that time, like I had money in my account. I had life insurance. I had a car. I had a lot of things working out for me. Literally, you know what I'm saying? I had a lot of things that were working out for me while I was still doing music. And so, like, my mind goes back, and I mentioned the whole SoundCloud thing. And so, I stumble on it. Why? Because I got some beats on there, and, like, I got a whole batch that I got to cook up, right? And so, I got shit that I'm lollygagging on, but I'm lollygagging on, like, just because I'm going through the motions type of shit, right? So, I'm not emotional. I'm just, like, so disorientated and I'm slowing things the fuck down to the point where I could understand it, right? And so I literally, um, what I'm gonna say, I literally like, I'm going through my SoundCloud. I go through some of the monologues that I already had on there, right? And I'm listening to some of the instrumentals that I have on there, right? I'm like, I gotta see if I can find these old projects. If not, then figure out a way to try to like make sure I throw them in my batch, right? And so um I had some monologues that I had started there, and then they just want to be in voice notes. So some of y'all got like the opportunity to hear some of those, right? And so I was talking about those. So I don't always post them because like I ran out of storage on my SoundCloud. Long story short, like I'm listening to these songs and I'm like remembering where I was at and I was in a better situation, right? And I'm not um like bitter and I'm like not defeated, but like I'm struggling to realize where the fuck I need to get to that and better, cause like that's not the best that life has to offer. You know what I mean? Like I was working so hard so that I could make life better. Then when I got there, I had to, you know what I mean, like deal with life and you know, like life ain't like you know what I mean, life ain't fair. You know what I mean? So it's like not to come up in here and then complain and vent and put all my private events and all my private life on this shit. But when you don't even got no private life, it's not to be a capitalist or anything like that. You wind up saying to yourself like, how could I capitalize? Like, cause like if this nosy motherfucker gonna know that I snuck and you know got some nookie or whatever the case is, right? Might as well like, and then and then it turns into this whole big fucking scandal or some shit. Like, might as well just have an OnlyFans anyhow. You know what I mean? Am I promoting this shit? No. Am I promoting it because I'm talking about it? I mean, they get some promotion regardless. Um, I mean, but regardless of what, like, and it's not something that I would want to promote simply because, like, I have a daughter, and I'm pretty sure that's something that she probably should have no access to until a certain age or whatever the case is. But that's not too far around the corner, and I'm not actively in her life, so this is where I have to interject this into the conversation because I'm a father, and it goes back to what I was talking about, right? And fatherhood, right? So now literally like we're hour and 40 minutes into this, right? And there's a lot of things I want to cover, and I gotta be mindful of the story. So just I mentioned this right because I circle back to this whole patriotic thing and why I started even talking about Judah to begin with, right? And so, like, man, I really wish I would have recorded that, and I'm not gonna do it no justice, kind of like trying to do it over, but I went into the whole scenario about how man, it might have been a real hot day, man, and Judah, like, not like he had jungle fever. He had some kind of fever though, right? Some overtook him on this particular day. Some overcame him on this particular day, and Lord had mercy. Lord had mercy through the vine of Jesus, right? Lord had mercy. Son overtook that man that day, and he was gonna go handle some business. And it might have been, I don't know how hot it was that day, but it was hot. It was hot. Lord Jesus, sweet Jesus, Lord Jesus, it was hot. It was one of them days, man. It was just one of them days he was hot. He was bothered. He went to go handle some business, right? And I don't know. I guess he like, you know, I don't know if he got over there on a donkey. I don't know if he got over there on a camel. You know what I'm saying? But they ain't had no 4x4s back then, right? And so like, you know, when you out there, like I gotta compare it to like a trucker. You know what I'm saying? Because like for them, like it ain't just like going to the corner store or something like that. Like yo, like it's like something that's gonna take all day to like get to where you need to get to type of nonsense. You know what I mean? So we don't know. Like damn near half a day, however long it took them, right? And so probably start out early before the sun come out, right? Now it's like damn near in the middle of the day, whatever. Let's say he make it over there, right? And he just pull over, right? You know, like how truckers do, right? So he just pulled over, right? And so they be having these little hot spots or whatever the case is, right? And so, like, he ain't know that was Tamar. How he ain't know that was Tamar? He found out that day that was Tamar that day. That day he found out. No, matter of fact, he ain't know that was Tamar that day. He had no idea that was Tamar that day. But some months later down the line, he found out that was Tamar. Now you know the whole big old scandal, right? Now mind you, he never smashed that after that, right? So he really was righteous. Maybe not as righteous as she was, but he really was righteous, right? Now, if you was paying attention and you caught the content that I did record, you already understand Tamar's angle, right? You already understand Tamar's angle, right? You know what I mean? It's like I don't mean to hold my thumb down and shit, but like you already understand Tamar's angle, right? And so she getting all hot and bothered, yo. Fucking hot ass day. You know what I'm saying? You know them thighs. You know how to get sweaty down there. You know what I mean? So, and now she extra excited too. My man pulled over. And so they had some business to handle, right? He needed to get his mind right. Got his mind right, and then he went to go tend to what he originally went over there to take care of, right? And all was good and all was well, and it got better. It was a little scandal or whatever the case is, but it got better, right? And why it got better? Because you see, in the heat of his lust, you and me, and I'm not trying to confuse things, but you and me have this beautiful thing called mercy that God, right, bestowed upon us. Why? Because he loved us before we loved him. And then when you come to understand that, and that becomes deeper when you become a parent. Not saying that you gotta go out and be a parent, but just understand if you're doing it nasty, that's what happens. You could easily become a parent. And so, with that said, we're gonna get into this very, very traumatic video. It made the news cycle. You know, I don't be rushing to run my mouth and say much, but you know, I think it still needs to be kind of somewhat evaluated, or I don't even know what we're gonna call it, but we're gonna take a look at this, right? Oh, before we take a look at this, should I actually well, we running low on time. So let's get right to it. Let's get to these videos, right? Got a little bit of pep in my step. Oh, no, we don't want to go there. Let's not go here. Let's go to, cause I had wound up getting some of these videos, and I want them sending them to myself, right? And yo, like, yeah, man. So looking at the screen all day, man. You know what I mean? Then you got a wild boner to come out of nowhere. Next thing, yo, check Shorty out, yo. Check Shorty out. Tell me this little. Check this out.
Damn.
I don't know if I had volume on this.
Damn.
See how fast he snatched that grip? Man, I want his dad or his uncle, whoever that was, like, he trying to better be his dad, hopefully, right? Little Shorty got the big grip over there, right? And his dad tried to finesse him and give him some little few bills and whatnot. And Shorty's looking at her, oh, look at this. Like, I can add this to my bank right here. And so he got money in both hands, and then he see how he trying to finesse the big stack out of his hands, and that's when he snatched it back. And you should see like his jaw outline, like he ain't said a word. Give me that shit. Fuck wrong with you, right? Yo, and so like you see these little tendencies that as a baby, like little by little, like you can actually wind up developing them, and then you can wind up being a full narcissist. Who's to say? But that's a good indicator, right? Not to say that he gonna be a bad person or anything like that. And the love of money, you know what I mean? Like we know that, but then like money's not the root of all evil neither, right? And so there's a lot of people with money that do good things with money, right? Like I mean, I don't want to use this guy as an example. I mean, but like this guy Bloomberg, right? Like he spent 500 million on the Democratic Party, man. That's a real generous guy, man. Like not for nothing. Like I wish, I wish, I wish I had that kind of money to spend. I wouldn't spend it per se in those kind of politics, but that party always generates money, man. And for whatever reason, it seems like what happened in this little video, they think we idiots, and so in reality, they try to toy with us. But that's neither here nor there, because we ain't talking politics, right? And so, the video I want to show you is right here, right here. There we go. Now, I don't hear the volume, man, so you got to forgive me. Let me see if I can get this volume cracking. Right, so this is Shorty, and she's doing a reaction video to this, right? And so we're going to watch some of this, right?
She just punched me in the face. We were just doing a street interview with my camera, and everything was 20 minutes or...
What's up, guys? It's your girl Riva, and I'm back again with another video.
Now, I know you guys have must have already seen this whole situation where a pro-lifer journalist actually ended up getting attacked by somebody on the street based off of the conversation. I saw that there was a whole interview of everything that basically led up to that situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and watch the video with you guys. I have not watched the entire thing. I've only seen the clip
So
of,
reacted.
the
So
girl clocking
reacted.
her. But we're gonna go ahead and watch it together. Pause, play, and I'll give you guys my feelings on this entire situation.
She pretty on point.
You have a channel?
Yeah, we're doing some interviews today.
I love your skin tone too.
Thank you. Such a good
Yeah.
vibe.
Of course.
Well, awesome. So we're asking people's opinion today on Planned Parenthood. Are you familiar with them?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know what they provide?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Safe.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know any other services that they provide?
I know, like, to teens, if you're under 18, you could get like birth control, condoms, counseling. They offer a lot of, beneficial things that the youth really should use right now.
Okay. So you have a pretty positive view of Planned Parenthood.
Now I only paused it right because some of y'all, a lot of y'all might know my story. There's a lot of information and stuff like that, right? A lot of rumors. I don't really wanna. I don't really wanna like exclude you know, my experience from it, and I don't wanna like poison the well. Or I don't wanna like you know what I mean, like try to tell somebody like this is what their experience is, right? So I could only share the fact that I've been to a Planned Parenthood out here in the city. Actually, I'm not proud of that, but I found myself in the circumstance. So this is why I like to kind of have this conversation, right? Because we tend to forget that, you know, is it procreation or is it recreation? And normally the recreation leads to the Planned Parenthood. And so we know, because this been in the news cycle, that the lady to the left, right, the lady with the bag and the brown, right, she winds up attacking the interviewer, and mainly is due to some triggers, right? But triggers due to the fact that we don't want to have the actual conversations that we need to have revolving the, because it's not just a topic. Like sex is spiritual, right? And so, um, you know, like there's so many ways to like have that conversation, and a lot of times, like super religious folks, like they seem to want to have it from the lens of condemning a person, as opposed to like trying to like really um get a person to understand like even just the basic principles of it, right? And so, um, it's certainly a conversation that should be had and should be had from early, which is why parents should be involved in the conversation. And I'm against it, like taking place even in school, and we're gonna find out why. The the lady who's reacting to these two having this interview in the street out here in New York, right? Um, she has a lot of good points, and she's gonna actually like um share them with us.
Majority, I don't know. Is this like a yes or no? Am I
It's
wrong?
your opinion.
But yeah, that is definitely my opinion. I feel like, especially as teens, people get caught up in things that they really don't want to commit to for their entire lives. So
Yeah.
if you get caught up with the wrong guy, you think you're in love, and then whoop, now you stuck. Not stuck, but you're stuck.
So this is interesting. Basically, knowing that what we all know of how this whole interaction ended up going left, I think this is very interesting because the woman walked up in a good mood. Everything was fine. She asked for her honest opinion and she gave it. And when it comes to Planned Parenthood, I know that there is like other things that have been done or other things that they do and stuff like that. But for the portion of what the woman is talking about, I kind of also agree in some of the positive aspects from the company. Mainly because, like, younger girls are, even 18, 19, young or whatever, and just out there kind of trying to figure things out. They are able, instead of having to go to an actual, gyno or OBGYN, they're able to go to these places and get things like contraceptives, birth control, stuff like that, get checked for things to make sure, if they have anything or if they don't. Like, so it offers a plethora of things for younger women, which I think is extremely vital, especially in the climate of today where everybody's like, oh, go out there, do whatever you got to do. It is what it is, sleep with whoever. It does bring some kind of, a place.
So I just paused it for a second because like fact of the matter is, yo, I don't know. I've been out the game. I don't really be knowing. I don't know what's what. Be honest with you, man. And so like it's important that we move out here accordingly, right? And so for me, like my whole thing is like I don't want to play myself. You know what I mean? And a lot of times, you know, people become victims in certain situations. So everything that they said, granted, right? But these are things that people don't take into consideration, and then because of having that lax uh, approach to really things that are sacred and things that are spiritual, a place like Planned Parenthood exists. But is it more beneficial or is it doing more harm? Because ultimately, what happens is, you know, although you want to be slick about it, right? Um, when does life happen, right? When does life happen, right? And so it happens at conception, but I don't know what it is out here. I know there's a little city, so I don't know if it's 23 weeks. I don't know if it's 16 weeks. I don't know if it's 6 weeks. I think they are, damn near to the point where it's like it's beyond 6 weeks. And I think 6 weeks is where the heartbeat is established, right? And so, you know, um, you know, in any incident or any accident, emergency, if the heart stops beating long enough, then the person is determined dead, right, at the scene, right? And so, like, the heart is a sensitive thing in a sense where, uh, let's go back, to some of our football guys, right? This guy, he had like a cardiac situation. It wasn't like cardiac. I don't know. It wasn't described as cardiac arrest, but it was something similar, and that's basically like when the heart sustains like some kind of like trauma, right? That causes it to stop like beating almost like abruptly, right? And so during the course of a game, what happens like it was just to like shoulder contact, normal contact, but at that particular time, like I let the what I mean, like that kind of you know what unfolded on the field, right? And so the heart is sensitive, but as long as there's a heart that's beating, um, or if it stops beating through like CPS and like like the right amount of pressure on the chest, you could probably reestablish like the heartbeat and you know revive a person, right? And so at 6 weeks of I'm understanding it, you know, um, some people consider it life, but it actually starts way before that, which is why I introduced Tamar to the whole conversation, right? And so and how guys will at a lot of times, like, what I mean, like people fail to consider that into the equation, right? And so the thing about it is, being facetious, but also being honest, like, yeah, it was just a hot summer day, but in the grand scheme of things, like what it leads to, right? So it brings forth the Messiah, right? Through his lineage, right? And so the fact of the matter, like, it's important to like not like be so quick to like what I mean, like rush to judgment and conclusions on matters and not like understand that God has a certain kind of overall overarching your hand in things. And so, yeah, man might have, his plans and, the saying and how it goes, but either way, like, you know, keep that in consideration, right? Because at that time they didn't have Planned Parenthood. At that time they didn't have contraception. At that time they didn't have like birth measures of the terms, and I'm pretty sure they had ways where they would come up with, like, they had someone discovered the rhythm, the rhythm stroke or however it goes. I forget it's been so long. What I mean? But like literally, like, the fact of the matter is, like, humans always been trying to be slick and trying to avoid that responsibility, and even now, right? And so, like, the sexual revolution, yeah, you can go back and say, oh, it took place this at this time, but you forget when you read the account of Moses and when he comes down from Mount Sinai and literally, like, he sees them acting a fool. What you think they was doing? What you think? Shorty was twerking. Shorty was busting it wide open. My man got so indignant, like, he broke the tablets. Like, God just gave it to him. He wanna, you know what I mean? And so, like, and here's the thing, like, we are gods. We little gods. We little gods. And I gotta come to that some kind of understanding, simply because, like, even though they got him so mad, it was Moses and his meekness and his humility and in his indignation, he wound up saying, I won't serve you as God if you won't forgive them. And you make a big deal about certain things concerning me, right? And so I don't know the whole grand scheme of things. I don't trust things like niggas know. But the way I move, motherfuckers want to super psychoanalyze that shit. If I decide I want to stay quiet and stay out the fucking way, I already explained myself in that regard, right? About that, but like I shouldn't have thoughts like that. I'm just not even trying to, like, impress or no. I don't even know, or turn off or whatever. I'm just thinking like my dominant, like, what my thoughts are, right? And so I could have journaled it, decided not to. I'm not over here trying to. I'm just over here trying to figure it out, trying to process it, and trying to understand it from my understanding in terms of, like, my higher self, right? And so I'm listening to Psalm 103. And as usual, when I go back and I listen to old joints that I made, like, I always be impressed. And I'm like, damn, it didn't come out the way I wanted it to. But, like, given the circumstances, I still didn't even know how to punch. I still don't even punch as good as I like to, or, like, on the fly as I would like to. Um, but, like, literally, like, I remember the whole learning process behind that, man, and how I had to piece that. And then, not only that, like those were actual, like, it's a song that, I mean, when I just listened to it recently, I'm like, alright, yo, it aged well. I don't know why that thought came into my mind, because I'm like, yo, I actually appreciate it more, but there's a reason why I did it. You know what I mean? And so, like, there's a whole lot of little Bible truths and, like, truths in there that, like, unless you're a true believer and you like love God in a certain kind of way, you won't be able to understand and appreciate. And so it's like I'm listening to it. And it's not that I'm being biased because I made the song, but, like, I'm like, I understood why niggas didn't really like it or fuck with it, but at the same time, like, fast forward to now, I understand why I didn't and why I actually still fucking like it. And then I'm over here thinking to myself, like, yo, I wanna actually do this. I don't mind doing it a cappella, right? And so I'm saying to myself, like, I haven't done, something recent or whatever the case is, right? And there's always a struggle trying to find my footing with that, or whatever the case is. But there's times where I have done it and it's been a real joy and it's been fun. And there's just times where it's like, I don't know, I can't say, but, like, there's times where it's like I'll be nervous as fuck, but then at the same time, like, there be those certain moments where it just, not for too long, but, like, like, the eyes connect, and, like, most of the time it should be a blur, but, like it just be like a certain kind of, like, damn, like a certain kind of soul feeling that feels kind of like good in some regards, right? I don't know how to explain it, man, but let's get back to this video.
A lot of these younger women can go to and get preventative measures as well as get screenings and stuff like that. So, for what the woman is talking about, I understand. Now, I can already tell things are going to go a little bit left, not just because of the video, but by this woman in the blues face. So, let me just press play.
What a baby for the rest of this time, literally the rest of their lives and your life, if you're that kind of mother, because some women just don't have it in them and they abandon them and abuse them and all kind of shit. And it's like, girl, just get rid of it if you know you're gonna do that. Get rid of it.
Now, I only pause that, right? And so I hate to do this because I hate to talk about this, right? But like, it's literally like, also, so as far as like keeping, like, a lot of my shit ain't private, you know what I mean? Which is why I mentioned the whole only, OF thing earlier, because like, even if I decided not to do that, like, it would still be something where it's like it's out there and it shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, but either way, like, that boils down to like what society has been groomed to, and so there's so many different ideologies fused in to the point where people, they would beg to differ, they would argue with me, they would do all kind of manner of just like, why are you wasting your time going out of your way about something that really don't concern you? It's just the act of two people. Now, if you know what I mean, and we're not even gonna get into that. And then, like, I could talk about that, but like, you know what I mean, I'm gonna just keep it like, you know, at least a little decent, right? And so I mentioned this because they're talking about Planned Parenthood. Now, as a father, y'all know my whole court situation, and so the stuff that I spoke about with Tamar that I keep alluding to, I was joking about how, you see, if you know the account, Tamar wound up having to go back to her father's place, right? So I remember, like, what was it, last Sunday? Yeah, like, not this Sunday you just passed, but the Sunday before, like, I remember, like, basically, like, just going through, like, all the emotions she probably might have been going through, right? Right before Judah gets there, right? Now, this is a time where there's no Planned Parenthood. You don't think that if he could have easily just hopped off his donkey and go to the corner, not even deli, just the corner merchant, and get some, I don't know, some weird ass sensu bean or some shit, along with a plan B, like he wouldn't have did it. Maybe he wouldn't have did it because he know the law, right? And he respected God, but at the same time, he still wasn't perfect, right? Still wasn't perfect, right? And so he don't know he about to get busy with Tamar. He get busy with Tamar. What happened? Tamar. What happened with Tamar? Tamar got two sons, if I'm not mistaken, right? One good old afternoon, that's what happened. And so when their life take place, one good old afternoon, right? So the moment you lay down, just know that that could be the day you making a baby. And so now you notice, man, and you put on a condom. Nothing against condoms, but I don't hear you talking about that shit when you talking about what happened with Onan. What's the difference? You think Onan wouldn't have just put the condom on if he could have? You know, sometimes it be in our back pocket and we forget. And so the thing about that, like, it's easy to conflate that with masturbation, but overlook the overall point, right? And so it wasn't so much about the spilling seed, right? Because I'm sure Onan wasn't the only one that was doing that at that time. And I'm sure God didn't put all of them to death, right? And so Onan had a mission, right? And he got the mission from the one who I asked you, where do the laws come from, right? Because not all laws are written, right? And so music is a universal thing. Um, Sex creates universes, right? Right? You know? Um, but like literally, like, so what happens in that scenario, right? And so we live in a different time, so we could defy these laws, but these laws were already written, and some of them were unwritten, in the sense where they're they're fundamentally embedded in life. You understand what I'm saying? In the circle and the structure of life, and so there's no life that we know that comes to be without that, right? Only the promises, right? And promises is only a comfort for a fool, right? But yet, where are you getting your promise from? The one who could vouch for himself, right? And so, where do I go with that, right? Where do I go with that? Because the fact of the matter is, Onan probably would have put a condom on, right? Because what he was doing, he was pulling out, right? He was pulling out. And whatever, she never got knocked up, and then God recognized that, and then we don't know if that's the exact reason why him and his brother died, but his brother died, right? And then he died, right? And so Judah recognizing that, but not knowing what we just finished explaining, not knowing what God knows, says like, nah, I ain't gonna send my son. That's my only son. I ain't gonna send him to her. You know what? Go back to your father. When he gets older, I'll send him over there. In the meantime, that's how we're gonna sort this. But as time went on, then he changed his mind. And so she over there, like I said, hot and bothered, right, under her father's crib, right? He knows, she knows, and so like she also knows. So this dude think he just gonna come over here? Oh no! So she dress up. He pull over on the side. He meet this heifer, and then later on, you know what I mean. We find out that he's the father, right? And so I'm sure he does what a good father does, and he take care of his seed, but he never have no situation with her after that neither, right? And so we don't want that. We want families. We want. You know what I mean? Ideally, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, we get caught up thinking like having all these women is a good look, but just one is a headache, man. I mean, one gonna make you run to another, so you know it's understandable if you got it within your capacity. But then there's also the capacity where some they could do without a woman. And so for me, like, I say, you can't live with them, you can't live without them. And so, I'm telling you about this shadow work I gotta do, Rob. And so the shadow work, um, I don't think it's necessary. Yet at the same time, you get information from all over the place, and it's like people try to tell you who you are, and try to tell you who you're not, and all kind of like manner of dialogue where it's just like all these voices where it's just like you know if you don't recognize like how to quiet all of that, like it could drive you crazy, it could drive you insane, right? And so um you know here rises all of these coaches and these dating coaches and all of these peaches, and I find myself in the same lane, but like um I mean, it's a struggle, man, because I don't peddle the word. It's a struggle because I'm not looking to be contentious with anybody's faith per se. I'm not just being defensive in that I defend my faith. Um, and yet, trying to live normal lives, like it could be a real challenge, you know what I'm saying? And then also, understanding like, you know, these times how they critical, man, and you know how you have all of these like disturbing personality types and you know all these disorders, like you know it can make just like life a challenge as an individual, as just finding like your social footwork, as just I don't want to say social footwork, like your social footing, like you know what I mean, like and so this is the whole fellowship thing that I was mentioning earlier, right? And so you know, there's different communities or whatever the case is, and you know, as you get older, you end up also kind of finding it a challenge, right? There's this, you know, the thing where they talk about being lonely and things like that, and so sometimes it's projected. Some people are actually fine being by themselves, and I say, you know, can't live with them, can't live without them, right? And so, you know, I was flirting with the idea of reaching out, and but then I said nah, right? And I'm like, from there, like, I don't know if like I intensified certain things, but then like certain things started coming for me in different various ways, right? And it's like not exactly how I projected or anticipated, but like on the voice, you know, I was like saying about being careful about what you plug into sometimes because like you know you could you know what I mean? Like when you unplug, like at the same time, you want to kind of having some things that you want to like wondering what's what. So when you talk about owning, you'll talk about it from the masturbation aspect of it, but you won't talk about the fact that like even if you put on a condom, there's some kind of like spiritual residue, some kind of like some shit that like it's almost like a venom kind of wrapped himself around you or some shit, right? Something that got like you know what I mean, like muted or like not muted, like transferred. I want to say right, and so you put the condom on to make sure that you don't transfer something, right? And so like it could be like bodily fluids, right? Because going back to that pattern, like that sperm, right? It might just knock her up, right? So that's what happened with Judah, right? But Judah was actually what her father-in-law or stepfather-in-law? Nah, father-in-law, right? Right. So how he knocked that up? Oh, because it was always God's intention for the lineage to come through Judah, right? Which is why at the time they had the brother-in-law what? They had the brother-in-law on marriage, right? And so Onan didn't obey the law, so he was being disobedient. It wasn't that he was just fornicating with her; he was being disobedient. Now I find myself in a similar situation, right? Now in that situation, it came in me with all manner of fuckery, all manner of bullshit, and then I just simply just told them like, "All right, well, how you coming at me? You coming at me like Samson, or you coming at me like Hosea and Gomer, right? Now, ironically, and I have to say ironically, right? And you can look up what that word means, right? But the funny thing about it is, in the same song that I'm referencing in Psalm 103, of which I didn't hear nobody telling me that I bit lyrics and this, that, and the third, right? I talk about Gomer. Gomer was whose wife was Hosea's wife. Hosea was who? And so I don't remember no church telling Hosea, yo, what to do in that scenario. But those were different times, right? And so it's not to go against the church. I mean, Christ did that. You know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is, it's like, so, you know, back to owning, right? And so if he could have put on a condom, you telling me he wouldn't have put on a condom? Yo, why am I laughing, right? Why am I laughing, right? Because the fact of the matter is, yeah, there's probably like a bunch of disciplined hoes out there that would have made sure, but that's not what Tamar was. That's why Judah said what he said. she was living with her parents. Well, her father, we know. But maybe if she was living by herself, maybe she would have been prostituting for real. I mean, when we look further down the line, we identify Rahab, right? Rahab wasn't living by herself. And so maybe I forget who her father was, right? Who her husband was. I forgot. Things start with a B or some shit. Or Salam or something like that. I'm not sure. Salmon or something like that, right? Then we realized like he could have possibly been one of the spies. So he overlooked what she was doing, but maybe she did that and she wasn't doing it no more. It's hard to say. The Bible don't speak in depth, right? But if we're able to, you know, look at certain things that are obvious and we're able to reason, like maybe she stopped doing that because she recognized the true living God, right? So, and her recognizing the true living God, um, all that we do know is that she stowed away the two spies, right? That's all that we know, right? That's all that we know, right? Maybe she had some appointments that day. Maybe she had some bookings that day. I don't know. Like literally, like um, but we know that for them to move forward, she probably had to like stop that, right? And so I was just watching this video with River. Let's put this video back on.
Why not
No,
just
but
give them
that's
to
what I'm
another
saying.
family? That's good.
No, but exactly even that, and that's another option that Planned Parenthood offers. So it's like if you know that you are not the being who can provide for this child, then there are alternative options out there for you.
I think that younger women need to not use that route as birth control, right? I don't believe that that is the right form of birth control. It has so many negative effects, even on the
If I could just elaborate, we're gonna get back to what she was explaining, right? And so a lot of times what happens too, it breeds this mentality where, oh, I think I could have one later on, and then it might be a little bit more of a serious challenge, or you might not ever get that opportunity. And I can't say. It depends on, like, what actually happened in that process, right? And that process takes place in these locations. So she's defending the location. She's interviewing her about what really happens over there and trying to educate her. And then in the process, it turns into like a heated clash of, different morals and principles and ideologies. And so we paused a video of this young lady. I think she pronounces her name River. Um, and she's offering like the voice of reason, right? And so here I am, instead of just doing a regular job, like, and it's not to complain, but I gotta give you this stuff. So like, I fall into this whole bracket, and so like, when it comes to like jobs, opportunities, and finances, it's a little bit tricky these days, and we all trying to like survive, and so like I go back to the original, like if you single, like why you looking to be married, and if you married, then why you looking to be single, and that's the simplest way for me to simplify it, right? To keep it, and then it's like what keep it what boring, like that's the beauty about life, and God created life in a sense where you don't know, and so like don't fall into this pattern of like you think you know everything. Like yeah, it's a scary outlook to you know possibly you know do something and something like bring a life into this world, but then at the same time, this is where we're gonna explore what happens when you miss out on that opportunity. What happens when you think like how or share the same perspective of you know either one of these two or either one of these three ladies.
body, right? But again, I think that there needs to be a lot more education on women preventing these situations, because a lot of these younger women are not preventing these situations sometimes it's because of a lack of knowledge, sometimes by choice, right? They think that that's what everybody else before them did, and there's
What happens when the dad is not in the house? And in the situation I just gave you, Tamar was living with her father, right? But this is modern society, and so it doesn't look like the patriarchy of back in the day.
do the same thing. And so that's just my opinion. I think that we need to have more of the forward conversation. Again, everybody's always focused on the cure instead of the prevention, the preventative measures that are necessary in the first place.
So
Yes.
I
And it's fucked up to say. It's fucked up to say because there's really like no right or wrong answer. I mean, yes, there is, but we're not being idyllic, right? And so the thing about it is like in the households where the dad is not involved, like does the mom take a lax approach to them having a boyfriend, or would they have the same approach as a defensive father or overly protective father, or are all men just insecure?
definitely understand why people do. Children, don't have babies that you don't want. Don't have babies that men are telling you in front of your face that they do not want. I wish them would stop doing that. Like it's like a plan to.
Why don't they just?
them.
Why don't they just stop having sex with people they don't want to have a child with?
That too. To me, it's always pro-choice, your body, your life. Because baby,
So she's making a valid point, right? But if you sit down and think for a second, you don't want to have kids with the person. So when I go back to the patent, like people get mad at that. When I describe it as a patent, people get mad at that. And then it's like, don't tell me about the "I told you so" book. And it's like, all right, so I'm chilling. I'm on my business. I stay out the way, man. I ain't with the controversies, right? And it's like now I'm being disobedient to God, and it's like, but God, like I did my part. What else do you want me to do, right? And so it's like, all right, well, um, what is it? You have this life, right? And so, you know, to go and contend with these people about this and about that, like is that the calling? Like what is this? Because like working a regular 9 to 5, like you know, from what I've come to understand with this whole targeted individual, chosen ones or whatever, it's hard for us to maintain a regular job, right? And so I'm doing a review of a review, and she's over here out there in the field, right? And I'm not sure if that's part of her content creation, but then little do I know, it seems like she's got this reputation of being an antagonist. So we have this scenario, and something happens where she voiced these emotions and these sentiments, and she wanted to exploding on her, right? And so we got to be careful in this age where everybody has an opinion, and so it's like a form of spiritual warfare. I got all of these opinions coming at me, and I'm saying to myself, like, I ain't even paying attention to none of this shit. Like, for what? You know what I'm saying? Like, like that's your narrative. That's the way you understand. If I decide, like, I'm not paying no mind to this because probably more important that I focus on, like, just slowing down and getting closer to God and censoring myself than anything else, and especially if it's not going to like be conducive, especially if it's not going to bring me closer to him, then why even pay it any mind? And so the phone is a major distraction, and eliminating that, you already know the best way to describe it, that's like the weakness that you got with your flesh. And so some of us are stronger. We could not even pay no mind to a phone for a few hours, and probably even some people even for a few days or a whole week or whatever the case is, or even longer. Like I had mentioned in previous posts, I was in a psych ward. So for 3 weeks, I didn't have access to my phone. There was a level of spiritual warfare that I was not experiencing. Yet, because of social engineering and how to make a way for yourself in life, you have to have this show display. And so I go back to this OF situation. And so, like, I'm not with the hookup culture, but at the same time, like, who says that, oh, well, yeah, if I was going to consider a family, I would certainly consider it on the basis knowing that I gotta provide for it, and obviously we want to be in secure situations, and at the same time, because I don't know what the right word is to say, but like in many of the scenarios when I think about modern day society, like men's roles have like shrunk to the point where it's like we don't have any roles, and they're trying to make it like even more less like undefinable, and it's not just about having undesirable positions, but like literally like I mean I gotta take that approach because like why would I start a family under these conditions? Like I can't depend on a 9 to 5, and our entrepreneurship is very competitive. You know what I'm saying? And you got to think about like a whole lot of things, like especially like where everybody considering themselves a brand. Like I'm pretty sure both of these ladies, and even the lady who's reviewing, they're somewhat of their own brand. So we're all out here trying to like survive, right? And like I mean, in the scenario with Tamar, like she wasn't doing it necessarily to survive based off of prostitution, and it wasn't just so she could get some. Even though I do agree that it's hard to overlook that fact, but then again, like she waited. Why? Because instead of taking the risk of getting pregnant by anybody else, she knew that at least she's doing it the right way, and that's through the lineage. And even though that shit sound funny, like how you want to fucking your your boyfriend's father, you know what I mean? Oh shit, well because you know what I mean? But you gotta understand the law. You gotta be able to read the Bible to understand certain things, right? So the dynamics are vastly different, and that's because like a lot of things haven't been upheld. You know what I mean? You got a lot of broken homes, so not maintaining that patriarchy as well has contributed to it. I said a mouthful. Let me just let these people talk a little bit.
That baby is gonna be a baby.
It's a baby.
Yeah, and you're gonna have that baby
person.
forever. So
Yeah. Well, do you
Exactly. Like, how did any of us get here? And like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's so sad that because if I ask that question, then I gotta actually like not be sarcastic and really like include IVF into the whole conversation, right? And then that's a whole nother thing. And then it's like, all right, well, why wouldn't you have that part of the conversation, right? And so this is where I go back to, and I'll circle back to Exo Squad, right? And so you got these feminists, they be pushing back and trying to make us look bad for just being in our dominant, and then calling us misogynistic and trying to shame us or whatever. Like, it don't break down the whole scenario of what man, like, the history of man or whatever, but it uses science fiction in a way where it's like they're already fucking with shit in laboratories, and they want to making some kind of race in an experiment that goes awfully wrong, and then it turns into like an intergalactic war between the planets, and within the planets, like the two species, which is the human species and the one that was created in a laboratory. Now, the ones that are created in a laboratory, they can't procreate like how we procreate. There's some kind of non-binary shit. And so I'm introducing this, but it was already introduced, right? And so I tell you, like with the Skrillex, like that was the first time that I seen that hairdo, right? And so feminists probably will wear hairdo like that, and probably like have a lot of those ideologies. So in the very first episode, you see one of the characters, and she's rocking a hairdo similar to Skrillex. And there's this character, Japanese character called Kaz Takagi, right? And he's a flight pilot, right? And they're part of the same squad, right? And you could tell he's a rookie. And in some ways, it kind of reminded me of like some of the conversations I had with Lynn, like and how I was trying to tell him like she gonna resent you for not having experience. So you could tell that the chick got experience, but that that dynamic that I just introduced is in the cartoon, so it's not developed. You don't see that, and so what you do see is the normal, natural. Like if it was to come out today, they would fuck it up and try to include all of these other stupid things in there. I don't mean to be offensive, but like they would try to introduce these things, and this how they subtly through spiritual warfare introduce these things and introduce this confusion. But at that time, not to say that that wasn't taking place, it still, although it was taking place, it still wasn't as prevalent and wild and rampant as it is so over and obvious that it is now, right? And so literally, like, um, what happened? Um, damn, we get into 2 hours and 35 minutes, right? So what happens is she's like telling him like, oh yo, no, like we gotta get back with the rest of our crew, right? And he he's kind of wild and rambunctious, and so she got a little bit of like more experience than him in certain things, and you can't tell if he's a virgin or not, but just imagine like he's dedicated his life to being like some kind of flight pilot, so he probably didn't have too much experience with girls, so he doesn't like have any like game other than just that raw like I like her, like and it's not fully developed in that, but like man, that's pretty much what it is in those like few sequences of events or whatever. So I can fast forward and bring out the point where she winds up giving him a kiss in his cheek, and he gets like all warm and fuzzy inside, right? He's like, yeah, like so you can see that heterosexual dynamic that I understand that there's a lot of people that feel that they're not born with, and like they'll push back and say like they're not, and I understand their proclivity and I understand their preference, right? And so we spoke up about preferences, right? But either way, you can still grapple with that if you want. And the reason why I say grapple with it, because I'm pretty sure, I mean, I'm not expecting anybody to grapple with that, but I'm pretty sure even though they decided not to, they still kind of like, well, yeah, whatever, but fuck you. like my preference is my preference type of shit, right? And so some people like they took heed, they recognize the wisdom, and probably it might be working out for them where they don't really fuck with their preference no more. I can't tell you, you know what I mean? But it's out there for you to, what I mean, like sit with it and I guess like process it, and if you find it useful, then apply it. If not, then disregard it. Whatever the case is, I ain't trying to like rile nobody up. I don't want no sequences of events like this, right?
Parenthood gets nearly $700 million of our taxpayer money every year.
700 million. I mean, honestly, I can't go against Planned Parenthood. I just can't. $700 million for how many single?
Yo, so we got people. Now I ain't trying to judge her. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to judge her. You know what I'm saying? But that's the crazy thing about it, though, right? Because like I don't know if you've seen like her true sentiment in it, right? And it's not even to like be disrespectful to her point of view, right? But that's also like a feminist point of view, right? Because she's not respecting like like how life is created, right? And she has some understanding of it to the point where she understands that it's better to do that than to have the consequence of bringing that light to like what I mean, like into the world, and then dealing with the craziness and the madness. And where does that craziness and that madness stem from? Narcissism, selfishness, right? Right? That I want to do what I want to do, right? And so like that's prevalent in each and every one of us. So this whole narcissism, like that whole topic is a tough thing for me because like you'll see it in a baby, and like at what point do you start demonizing it, or you recognize like yo, there's a little fucking devil over here, right? At what point do you recognize that? You know what I mean? Is it too early? And only God ultimately decides that, right? But like at the same time, a little bit of leaven ferments the whole bread, and so if, like you don't see certain of these things early, like it could spread, and it could spread wild, and like next thing you know, you led astray, right? And so like definitely not coming for her, like cause I think she makes some valid points, right? But the same way you seen like where her heart was at, and so I'm not gonna jump to any conclusions that she even had one. I think she confessed to maybe one, but in certain scenarios, there's people that have multiple, right? And like, and it's not even to judge them because they're basing their actions based off of like a lot of the same sentiments that she shared, right? And like, why bring a child into this confusing, crazy world? Like, why do that and make it harder for them? And you're not even responsible. You can't take care of them, right? And so, if my parents had everything right, like, I mean, they still had me regardless if they had everything right going for them or not. And even if you got a job, you could lose your job very easily. Like my dad would tell me stories about like when he was laid off, and it was like, over 2 years or 2 years. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you know, um, you know, like it's good to be working. Don't get me wrong, but like even now, like not to make excuses, like it's a tough climate. Like, what does this job market look like? And what are you doing as far as like if you're in this niche or in this space or whatever it is, like whatever your industry is, like if you're into entrepreneurship, like you know all of that stuff, like there's a whole different kind of grind from a 9 to 5. And so you know like trusting in this world, like 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 and when I say trusting, like I say that because like a lot of times people will try to make it seem like, oh well, you're Christian, you shouldn't like money is an object that you can't have or something like that. And it's not that. It's just that you also, depending on how devout you are, you also know that like one is gonna pull you away from the other. It's like being laid up with your shorty, right? And as opposed to getting money, like that's gonna take you away from getting like and handling your responsibilities, getting things done and handling your responsibilities. Now, I'm interestingly enough segue, and I mention this because literally like I don't know how to say it, but like if I'm thinking properly, like, and I'm thinking like, all right, well, with this ON stuff, that's also content, but I don't want to make it where I'm some kind of gigolo. Not that I wouldn't want to, but we're gonna get into it. Rotimi explains why he opted not to, and he wound up settling it down, and that was always my perspective. And then I wound up having that manipulated it and twisted and turned into some sick, crazy ass game that people try to really fuck around when it comes to with my life. And you know, it's wreaked a whole lot of fucking havoc. And like it's not even like ain't nothing in life fair, but like it's not even like you know what I mean? Like it's not even like I went out creating enemies. Like people just out of nowhere just wanna try to like, you know, let the devil use them and interfere with, basically my calling. You know what I'm saying? And so literally like some of this has to do with my spiritual handlers. And so um I I recognize like I gotta live I gotta live my life, and I gotta do that according to God's will, right? And so um at this point, like I'm in a scenario, and I'm doing what I best can to like not just stay afloat, but like literally like you know like have a life where it's like I could call that, or I could feel some semblance of success. You know what I mean? And so I had to take a step back, and you know in some regards you know I'm not entirely sure how to move forward. And so that could bring on a lot of anxiety, but like in the way I tend to think. And so I'll go back to my dominant way of thinking. And the way I tend to think, I literally recognize like, yo, like I don't have to accept this bullshit. I don't have to accept this defeated whatever, you know, is coming at me, this spiritual warfare. I got God in my life, and I understand like um he has my best interest. And so like literally like the more I come to understand his ways, the more I'm gonna be in his will, right? And so literally like I don't wanna step outside of his will. And I got a lot of things that's trying to draw me out of that, right? And um I still gotta live life, and all of it is somehow this big confusion of like how to move forward. And so I mentioned the whole OF situation. I don't know how this technology shit works. Sometimes y'all reach out, sometimes y'all don't. I had some kind of power dynamic. I don't know what the fuck to call this shit, but some weird shit. And I mentioned how I do some shadow work, right? And you know, I got people telling me not to. And so when I understand why they're telling me not to, I know that some of them have my best interests, but some of them are trying to play God in my life. And so I know my relationship with God better than somebody could try to tell me. And this is why I always try to like um encourage y'all to develop your relationship with God. You don't necessarily need something to intercede, or I mean we do need intercession, don't get me wrong. We need intervention as well, but like you don't necessarily need someone to have a direct connection with God is what I'm trying to say. And so what happens is when you try to fill that space, you fill it up with idols. And so that could be the most obvious thing, or it could be something so subtle that you don't recognize. And so we all got these things, and it's important for us to take inventory in our life, right? And so, um, central to what I'm concerned with, like that literally has to do with like ministry, right? And so, like, I didn't sign up to be a minister. I was just certainly ministering to myself, and in the process, like, um, you know, started sharing certain things that I started teaching certain things and sharing, started sharing some things that, eventually I guess I wound up teaching, whether knowingly or unknowingly, right? And so, um, what happens is, when it comes to like this content, right, and what I'm trying to curate, this is some of it, but it's long form content, and there's different approaches to it. But as far as the OF is concerned, like I had somebody kind of reach out, but indirectly not reach out, and so it's like this weird dynamic. So I reached back, and so the fact of the matter is, then it got weird because then a whole lot of things started reaching towards me, and I'm like, what? Like, and then try to almost make me cower as opposed to like, I will say something. Well, the fact of the matter is, like, and it's no secret that God created um, man and women, right? He created us to, you know, have a family, right? Not just a physical family, but a spiritual family. So this is where fellowship comes into play, right? And the thing about it is, a lot of y'all forget that this is spiritual, so y'all just focus on the physical, and this is where this lady doesn't understand that. Now she might understand it to a capacity, but she's not trying to have that in this conversation. And so she's only focused on the part, which is why she's like, I can't go against Planned Parenthood. And the reason being is because, like, physically, you understand, like, she knows that that's the life that she'd rather live, and that those are also the consequences, and that's the solution. And so it's easy for her to dismiss it because in her mind, perhaps she doesn't consider life to happen when conception happens. She doesn't consider that life is created that same night, most likely. You know what I'm saying? She doesn't consider that. Now she knows that, but she's also like, all right, well, I could outthink myself out of the situation. Planned Parenthood is right there, right? And so when that happens, and then as time moves on, you hear all of these wreck trains, right? And so you hear about your homegirl who got pregnant, right? And you hear about how her baby father's a dusty weirdo, and you hear about how he don't take care of her. Or you hear about how, you know what I'm saying, like she not happy and all this other stuff, right? Like literally, like it gives you more incentive to just do you and live your life, right? And as we know here, because we realistic, once you start, it's hard to stop, right? You notice, and you notice, man, right? Once you start, it's hard to stop, right? And so, you know, this is where we don't make an argument why we shouldn't stop. We just understand that self control is to our benefit, right? And we realize that having these uncontrolled passions, although they seem like they're liberating, they're actually not. And this is where the feminism operates under this false guise. So let's get back to this.
Others.
Of our money. But they're not giving it to single mothers, though. Yeah.
I mean, if we're gonna just, single out where it is that our tax dollars go, then the police, respectfully.
So it's really interesting because since 2010, prenatal care has been down for 80% since 2010 at Planned Parenthood. Adoption referrals. So this is why this is research straight from their yearly report of 2022 to 2023, I believe it is. And so they're a 501c3. They have to tell us what they do every single year. So this is straight.
Which should be any union corporation. If we are paying tax dollars towards you, I need to know that you are doing the job and doing it correctly.
Right. But let me continue to tell you. So the STI testing and treatment down 15% since 2019. Client numbers down overall 34% since 2006.
Nobody has insurance. I don't have insurance.
Donors down 21%. Contraceptives down 44%. Breast screenings, manual breast exams down over 80%. And you mentioned adoption. They commit 228 for every one adoption.
Okay, so I see now where this woman is bringing her, and this is why sometimes statistics are extremely necessary in these kinds of, controversial conversations, because basically all the stuff that I was saying about these younger women, like, they go out there, they can get like these screenings, they can get preventative measures, they can get all these things. She's saying like basically the majority of the, places are not actually doing those things. Right? That's not the highest percentage of the things that they're doing in their offices. It's actually going to, when people no longer want children. So I see why she's having the dialogue, because she's saying like, you're standing behind this. But if we want to be honest, what you are talking about is not actually what is the majority of things that's taking place.
Referral. So why are they getting so much more money yet all of their services are going down?
The services are going down because people are afraid. Women.
What are they afraid of?
Women don't know. They don't know what they're exposing their bodies to. A lot of people, especially behind there's a stigma.
But their abortions are going up. So they used to have this slogan where they said safe, legal, and rare. That's what we want. Safe, legal, and rare abortions, until it was exposed that a lot of these facilities were requiring quotas. So the more abortions each facility did, the more like praise that they would get.
That's crazy to me. That's wild. So what she's trying to say is that it's an intentional thing, right? It's intentional that they're not supplying the contraceptives, they're not supplying the education or anything like that. Like it's intentional that they're actually doing the opposite so that they can meet their quota. If that is true, I don't know her research. I didn't research it myself. I'm just being honest.
Now, mind you, where are these locations for these facilities, right? They're mainly in the hood. They're mainly catered to. We spoke about the Democratic Party earlier, right? And so, like, without going on a long diatribe, without going on a long tangent either, like, literally, like, some of y'all, man, like, go back and read some of the Genesis account, but even more so, go back and read some of the Exodus account and find out how shrewd Pharaoh was dealing with the Israelites, right? And so these things are strategic. These facilities are strategically placed in certain communities, certain locations, right? And you don't recognize that level of spiritual warfare. You're encouraged to not bring offspring, and it's understandable because that comes from many angles. Like what I mean, like not only you being attacked, about who you might kind of want to get with, or even beyond that, like financially. You know what I'm saying? And so, which is in many regards even more important. And so, um, it's kind of hard to like recognize like, all right, well, sex is made for procreation. It's not made for recreation, because when you look at it only from that angle, it has a lot of dire consequences and responsibilities. And like it was mentioned earlier in this interview, you get to recognize that a lot of times people are not built for certain commitments and don't want that type of commitment and that responsibility, and they forget that there's still consequences that come with that lifestyle and that way of living, and it still affects not just them, but affects society as a whole.
Y'all know why we came here, and that's because she punched her, right? But based off of what she's saying, if that's true, I think that's absolutely crazy, and that's a horrible thing. And I know that the woman in the brown was saying that it's hard out here because people don't have insurance, but that's not actually how Planned Parenthood works. I know that they work for like I think like if you have a certain amount, like they'll work with you, like they're very younger woman friendly because of that, because it's not like, oh, you have to have your insurance, you have to this, you don't have to have all your ducks in the row when you go there, and they're still going to be able to assist you.
They would get awards, and so it's really interesting. That doesn't really make it seem like they want safe, legal, and rare.
How many people can you think, or are you going to assume, would literally abandon their children with no repercussions from the state?
No, it's called safe haven baby boxes. We're at a fire station or hospital. You can leave your baby, and the mother doesn't have to do anything with it. But that's better than your baby through a, right?
No, ma'am.
And so I don't. It's not an easy yes or no. Like in this regard, I kind of side with the 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 woman in the brown, right? Um, but I'm pro life though. You know what I'm saying? But like, you know what I mean? Like the whole foster kid system, man. You hear nightmare stories behind that stuff, man. So it's like, why would you want to do that? But then again, in the heat of the moment, you might not be thinking. In the heat of the moment, lust overtake you. In the heat of the moment, um, you just, whatever the scenario is, right? That causes a person to like not think properly, right? In those situations, right? And so, you know, there's definitely solutions in how people consider Planned Parenthood, or the abortion night after pill. But what the person Reva, what she's also trying to get at, without actually like talking about it, is like is the root cause of it. Like, how do you get people to um, understand these repercussions and these consequences before embarking on them, so that we can minimize the byproduct or the outcomes that you know are crippling society. And it's hard to do that without the Bible, even though I'm not saying, I don't know what her religious take is in it, but she didn't really include it in here. And like, really, what other solution could there be other than for people to like have a come to Jesus moment, understand the value of life, and understand like their relationship with God, and understand that He created their temple, and ultimately, like, you know, what comes with, the wages of sin, right?
Better to give your baby up to a family who wants them instead of
No,
them.
ma'am. I have seen so.
You see, this is why I have a hard time with these kind of conversations. And again, the reason why is because a lot of the discussion is starting at 5. We need to start at 0. And starting at 0 is, we need to be having more conversations on preventative measures. Like, they're kind of talking about after the mistakes have already happened, after the lack of education, like we're dealing with the result of the problem. My stance always relies in the beginning, preventing the problem. That's why I don't really usually talk about these things, because we're already talking about after the mistakes. Like, no, we need to talk about more education for younger women, more where women are understanding, like, you have your autonomy, right? Like, your body, your choice. So if you are not in a space, in a stage to be able to, have or take care of children, then you need to take preventative measures so that you do not get pregnant. Not you get pregnant, oops, my bad, I can't take care of it, I don't know what to do, and now we're having to figure out all these situations.
So many stories and countless, literally, like countless stories.
What happens in an abortion?
Literally suck the life out of you. They're gonna take the whole baby out, and as they should, because I shouldn't be a taxpayer paying child support and food stamps and WIC for
You
women
should be a
who never wanted
taxpayer
the
paying
baby.
for a.
Exactly. But as for a woman who didn't want the baby in the first place, that doesn't make sense to me. Don't ever sit here and lock yourself down with a man who already told you he doesn't want to be with you. He doesn't.
I
want
agree
to
with
provide.
you.
I'm not disagreeing with you either. I understand.
You don't get to kill
What
the
I'm
baby just
saying
because
is
their dad didn't
that
want
you
them.
can.
Should we keep kids in foster care? And
Why not?
that are-
See, this is the thing, right? I can see how this conversation escalated. First of all, they're in New York City, okay? And everybody who knows that, like, when it comes to an argument can easily go from 0 to 100 in New York City, okay? For nothing, right? For a little bit of nothing. So I was not surprised when I saw the street signs and where they were standing, and then saw the punch happen. I was not surprised at all. But I think that this situation started to escalate because now, to prove her point, the person who is the journalist is now trying to add certain tidbits into the conversation just to get the other person on her side. And I think that, if you're a journalist and you're having this kind of discussion, I think that there needs to be space that you allow opposing ideas, right? She doesn't have to agree with you. She doesn't have to agree with your sentiments, and likewise, right? You don't have to agree with whatever the case. But now when you're trying to talk about the kids in foster care and now all these things that happen, like, the woman's, response to this, I don't think it's a genuine response. I don't think if she actually went to a building where foster care was happening, she would say, yeah, just go ahead and, like, delete them all. I don't believe it. I think it was an angry reaction just to say, like, I'm standing 10 toes down on what I feel. That's just my opinion. That's my opinion. Is it crazy what she said? Absolutely. Like, that was absolutely crazy.
Why not? If that's the case,
we should keep kids in foster care that aren't wanted.
who's going to take care of them? I need to know the percentage of people who take children from foster care and abuse them and molest them, who make them like personal slaves.
We should just them.
Statistics before you come to me talking about pro-life.
I understand what she's saying still, because there is a downside to certain things that happen, like with foster care and stuff like that. We've seen the stories. You can go on Hulu right now, Netflix, and you're gonna see all kind of documentaries of kids that were put up for adoption, foster care, whatever, and the things that they actually go through, the trauma that happens to these younger children.
Literally, you know what I mean? And I wanted to curate this a little bit more better, but I didn't want to take too long with trying to get a video to y'all right today, right? So it had me thinking about, like, you don't hear too much about this, right? So there was this gay foster couple. They had like 2 or 3 children, and they put them in a gay sex ring orgy. Like, how could you do that? And it had me thinking about that whole, the whole Justin Bieber and the scandals with Diddy. Like, it's crazy because society breeds this type of mentality, and then wants to try to act like it's really like sympathetic to it. Like, no, you're not. Like, you create the problem, and you perpetuate the problem, and then you want to try to act like 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 it's a problem that you you want to solve. In reality, like it just goes beyond my comprehension, because it's just this hypocrisy, man. It's disgusting, man. Literally.
And though my point, my stance within the conversation is we need to have preventative measures. Okay? there needs to be something in place for younger women who do not want to be mothers, who are not ready to be mothers. We need to have that conversation. We need to figure out how we're going to educate younger girls, because right now the space for younger women is the complete opposite. All of the media that they're digesting, all the information that's coming forth towards them is telling them the complete opposite. Go sow your royal oats, go have your 304 face, sleep with whoever is the highest bidder. Like, that's the conversations that are being had. Instead, we need to change that narrative to younger women again to prevent these situations in the first place. So I hate, like I said, starting the conversation at 5 when we need to start at 0.
We should the
as a
victims of
child, I think, what does this have to do with
you just mentioned people children. We should the kids in foster care is what you said.
overall? What I'm saying is, in general, overall, if I don't want to have a baby, I should have the choice to.
Just don't have
the
sex
baby or
then.
not.
Just don't have sex.
That's not even logical. You
It is.
dumb as
It
like,
is.
who are you, Nancy?
I
fucking
sound
dumb?
dumb. I
You
sound
do.
dumb as okay.
It does, because even as teens, people explore, and it's like, as funny as you want to be,
well.
people should still have the choice.
So you went from
People do explore. Again,
Yo, which is why I said democracy took place in the Garden of Eden, right? So, like, yo, this is a very unpopular take, right? And the thing about it is, I've been trying to, like, mother soul in my mind, like, cause, like, it started with it, like, a couple weeks back, where I was trying to, like, I was, like, basically narrating an experience that I had at the library, right? I went to go, print out some resumes, right? And on that particular day, I spoke about it on one of the voice memos, maybe, I think. Well, I spoke about it previously, right? So I had a whole bunch of thoughts as I made my way out of there, and I kept thinking about just like things that just naturally came into my mind, right? So it was like an idea that I thought was kind of like clever, cute, or whatever, and it revolved around the interaction with a young lady or whatever. And it didn't have to be a young lady; it could have been a lady or whatever. But anyway, and so like I played that in my mind, but I didn't act on it, right? But it wasn't really important, and I was feeling some type of way because I was thinking that, and something was telling me, but it wasn't nothing directly, but was telling me that I shouldn't think like that. But I'm like, yo, that's just my natural thought, like. And so, whatever, like, most of the time, your first thought is your right thought, and other times, you might reason against it and find a better reason why it might not be, or whatever the case is. So, you want to think things through, I want to say. And so, man, that came out kind of funny. And so, damn, yo, just give me a second. Oh yeah, like, it's a weird thing, cause it's where this whole feminism thing started to come into my mind. Cause like, I mean, they weren't like direct interactions, but like just certain projections that was like I don't know, man, like somewhat kind of present or whatever. And I'm like, yo, did I perceive that correctly, or are you trying to like insinuate? Like, I'm not understanding, like, so like I'm over here like in this fog, and I'm saying to myself, why am I feeling like this? Like where did that come from? And so, um, then I started looking into this whole feminist thing, and I'm like, all right, well, damn, if this ideology. That's why I typed what wave we in, cause I thought it was fourth wave when I was a kid. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm thinking. Probably progress, and it's in a different wave now. To me, this is where IVF comes into the picture, and so, she didn't throw her hands yet, but like you see her getting a little bit more animated. She got her back towards her. She's feeling like she wants to leave the conversation. She's probably restraining herself, but she's like feeling like I mean, I don't want to describe it as highly emotional, but she's feeling like her belief system is being challenged in a way where I mean, violence erupts shortly after, right? And that's due to her and in her way. I don't know if these are her words, but like her defending her point of view, right? And like you know, considering that the interviewer kind of antagonized or provoked her, right? And so, um, this is the world where this is just a urban setting, right? And like literally, like I'm counting. Besides them two, I'm counting one, two. I don't know if that's a poor person. I want to say three in front of the door across the street. Then four person on a bike, and so like it's not nighttime. It's probably more people outside. It's active, right? It's taking place in like busy street pretty much. You seen the buses in the background, so it's like everybody has their own belief system, right? And so in certain scenarios, it turns into what's about to unfold. Other scenarios, it winds up being like conversation. But it's one that you know we never. It's one that you know, we never like get a conclusive answer for, right? And so, um, like that leads to Christ, right? Because in our narcissism, right, there's always gonna be someone who's gonna view things as if they're so right, and so each one of us has that ability, right? Maybe not to that extreme, but I mean, there's a society where that's being bred more and more and more and more and more and more and more, right? So it's only gonna lead to more and more conflict. Conflict leads to wars, right? And so ultimately, we already had a World War I, World War II, and there's this fear of this threat of World War III, right? And so, you know, in terms of what the masses may subscribe to, World War III looks like, mass destruction, right? And in terms of what some enlightened folks think, World War III already has taken place in the stage for World War IV, right? And so, like, there's so many different ideologies, right? And what do you subscribe to, right? And this is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. It's been taking place since the beginning of the time. And so, God had prophets and prophetesses, right? He had more prophets than prophetesses, but either way, like he's had people throughout time that were significant in his like purpose, right? And so we read about those accounts through the Bible, but certainly after the Bible, there's been many, you know, um, many people with zeal, right? And so the Bible also talks about false prophets, and this is where, like I mentioned, that World War III probably might have already took place, and so, um, a false prophet has a way of misleading people. World War III took place, and you're scratching your head like, when did that happen? And that's obviously because you was misled. We was misled, and so we didn't even know that it happened right under our nose, type of stuff. And that's the subtlety of certain spiritual warfare, right? And so, you know, um, like I was explaining, I'm getting all this spiritual warfare. Mainly, is coming from like these projections, and it's like, yo, say something, and it's like, what's there to say? Like, I'm not scared to, address the issue. Like, but I don't even know if it's if it's a real issue to really undress. You know what I mean? Like I don't, I don't understand how this is like, this augmented reality where people try to like manipulate and confuse you cerebrally, like have you in psyops and all kind of weird narratives, and it's like, yo, like don't tell me it is what it is when it's never it is what it is. It's always some kind of illusion or some bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, it's always some kind of some kind of corny illusion, and I'm like, yo, I fall back, man. I'm good, man. You know what I mean? Like, if anything, let me just like tend to the things. And so I was debating whether I was gonna actually go to a place of worship, right? And I recognized that I ain't really have a reason not to, other than probably me letting certain narratives get to my head or whatever. So I didn't subscribe to any of them, and I did what I normally do, and so I went. But while I went, I had a certain particular experience that I know I didn't experience by myself. Although I can't say everybody experienced it, I also recognize that um like for me, I was away for so long that it felt good in some capacity, but there's always the church politics and all that nonsense. Um, I mean, it got me, wondering like, if I'll return to, more consistent meetings. Um, and then, you know, I don't think about it too deeply because like I don't want to necessarily like abandon um certain people that have over time kind of grown with me or come accustomed to you know um how I deliver the word. And so um you know even with me, like, I had to sit down and really like slow things and kind of like get into that frame of mind and thinking about things in that kind of lens. And so it did feel good to be in the mix, but I ain't let none of that get to my head. I was happy to see folks. I seen a lot of new faces. And then, as usual, just always adapting, man. So, um, um, and so that's the thing, right? So, like my ministry kind of like, you see how they in the streets, right? Like this is not a biblical channel. I don't think her channel, the person who's reacting, I don't think her channel is biblical. I'm pretty sure she believes in God, but I don't think her channel is biblical. I'm pretty sure they all have their own belief system. Long story. And so I don't know if the person who's talking about Planned Parenthood, if they were actually doing a biblical channel, but just like the host said, like having the conversation from the beginning, and it's hard to have that. I mean, when you do that, that's when you get into politics, and that's like, slippery slope. You know what I'm saying? So, you gotta have that whole conversation, and it revolves around the Bible. God created sex, and he created within, he made it so so hard to work around the fact that it's for marriage. Now, marriage is not for everybody, right? And that's the easy defense, but literally, like, without marriage, then you create like less families, and within the human like structure, family is important. We're talking about the one who created family, right? He had angelic sons, right? So family started in heaven first before it started over here. And so he wanted to create a new thing on this planet. And so they were aware of it, and Satan interfered with it. And so God could easily like make his point, but the fact of the matter is he gave each and every one of us free will. And so you see some of this acting out in front of these two individuals. And yeah, it's easy for us to criticize, or maybe we not criticize, just but offer our insight, our perspective, our response, and review this. But like, literally, these are two planets, right? And they have their own perspectives, right? And you know, they're both, from what it appears, obvious that they're both women, right? And they have strong belief systems. Now, I have to say that they're both women because, like, not for nothing, like, it's through, it's through women that we get to know life, right? But we disregard the father in the process, right? And that's not right, and that's what leads to this unstable, decadent world where things are so volatile that eventually it's gonna lead to a collapse, right? And so the fact of the matter is, it's like, you know, they both are right in some aspects, right? But now it gets to the point where, and now I quote a scripture to hold every thought captive, right? Because if they're both right, right, what happens? It says, there's a way that man thinks he's going the right way, but in the end lead to destruction. And so they both think that they're right. She thinks that it should be pro-life, but according to her, what's the point of bringing in a life and then having them grow up in a foster care system that leads to destruction? And then she's saying, but it's not fair to not give them the opportunity to live, and that you're destroying lives, even though you might not consider them lives, right? And so, that's just a quick synopsis. It's not doing any justice of what their point of view is, but I'm somewhere in between what I just finished explaining. Hopefully, I didn't get it wrong. Is their truth, right? And so, their truth comes to a head, and she gets physical with her.
Lack of education, lack of knowledge. A lot of the conversations that you have with people from before, they didn't even know how exactly pregnancy works. They didn't know about, tracking ovulation. They don't know about a lot of different things. They're out there. They feel like they have no person to talk to that's older, that's more experienced. And then, boop, there's a baby. And so now we have to figure out what's going to happen and what the situation is, right? But I do agree that, like, yeah, if you are not equipped, and this is not really for the younger crowd, but it's, there's some grown women who treat, baby deletion, going over there and having them just do whatever they got to do with it as a form of birth control. So like when you know better, you're supposed to be able to do better. But some people just don't care. They don't care. 1, 2, 3. And
And so it's important that I actually bring this up, and I mentioned this many times before, because what happens is, even if you think that's the solution and you're not considering the spiritual aspect of it, the whole reason why you even considering it and going to the full length of what exterminating or terminating a baby is simply because one is growing within you, and that eventually will lead to a baby, which is a human life, right? So you understand that a human life is living and growing inside of you, and although you don't like the fact that it's true, you might lie to yourself, and women are prone to lying themselves and try to term it in a way where it makes it, less of an inconvenience for you and stresses you out less, but it still stresses you out nonetheless, right? And so the fact of the matter is, what happens is, um, with this child, right? If you do so decide to abort the child, um, what happens, that's still a body, right? That's still a life. Okay, it's not a life because it can't talk, it can't walk, it's not a life because you say it's not a life. Either way, what is growing inside of you has somebody else's DNA fused with your DNA, and both of y'all are gonna create this baby that's gonna come out 9 months later, and it's gonna look like some of you or most of you, or it's gonna look like a combination of you and him. And the fact of the matter is, um, even if you decide that you want to terminate that, you already infuse that into your system. You know that, right? You already infused that to your system. So when you get mad when we talk about body count, it's because what reason? Also, we got to deal with accountability, right? And so, I don't know if households where the father is absent, if mothers are more lax to let their, daughters, learn these experiences, and without them recognizing it, they want to contribute to the problem in a sense where it's like, um, now without them even knowing, it's hard to pay a bond, right? And so there's so many consequences that come with it. And so we don't want to talk about them because they're true. We don't want to talk about them because they're uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about them because they're going to call us to, you know, change our behavior or start thinking about our behavior. And we don't want to think about these things, right? And so, you know, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing where it's like, you know that you're the problem, and at the same time, there's nothing that you want to do to correct the problem, right? And that has to do with the fact that, you know, it all boils down to our behaviors, right? And so, I mean, for me personally, like, when I think about it, I totally get it. Um, Especially when you see society just like, but then you hear these stories about the dating game, And so people ruin people. So why would you want to bring kids into this world? And once you decide that you don't want to bring kids into this world, why should it be that you can't enjoy the pleasures that come with sex? I didn't create it, he did. And for whatever reason, he made it that way. And so you could go against that, but I don't know too many people that have had too much success. And, you know, I know people that will regrettably admit it. I know people that will lie and say that, but deep down inside they do know. And so there's no way around it. And I guess it just boils down to, your relationship with God. And so if you have one in terms of, you feel convicted, then, that changes your way of living. And, you know, that doesn't mean that you're still gonna prevent these problems. Um, and so you take into consideration that everyone has to make a personal decision, right? And just with that said, we're all gonna be accountable to God. And the reason being that it's important that we understand that is because there really is no right or wrong answer. You could pursue your career, you should, right? And then at the same time, you know, there's always a catch 22 with everything in a lot of regards because then you want to hit in that wall and then the opportunity. And so there's technology now. And instead of extending the life of, and they have, there's some women that have had babies on record, I think as old as the age of 50 or whatever the case is. And there's certain complications that are exacerbated as they get older. But no doubt we live in a time where it is certainly possible. But then it kind of puts you in that Benjamin Button scenario. And so now, yeah, people are still, you know, obtaining better health or striving for it. But in many regards, like, you know, there's a lot of dire consequences having a child later in life, right? And so, um, you know, it's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to consider, right? And so, speaking of unpacking, and so, and so, like literally, like I say that because I'm not trying to condemn. I'm not trying to exalt. I just need people to understand, like, life is complicated, and God left a manual, and this is Bible, and you try to make the best decisions for yourself possible, using that as a tool, right? And fellowship is important because when you're not around like-minded, good character, like it spoils good character, So it's important that you know and if society as a whole is going to be decadent, then it's just going to spoil more and more and more people. And so, you know, it might feel liberating to, not be married and have as many sexual partners, but there's also something that there's an ugly side to it that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and they don't like to talk about it mainly too because they don't they don't want to be left alone over there. It's that same thing from which the devil operates from, right? And so he knows where he's going, so he kind of wants to, not be there by himself. So he finds foolish little ways to slyly, cunningly trick us. And a lot of us don't take that into consideration as our senses and, our pleasure senses are being manipulated. And so, you know, if we're going to have the conversation and we're really going to have it, she's right. We can't start at five.
They kind of overuse or abuse that way of doing things just to cover up whatever it is that they got going on because they didn't feel like it because of finances, whatever. So I can see the conversation. Another thing is that when the woman in brown was saying like, oh, if a man doesn't want a baby and he showed you signs that he doesn't want to have the child with you, then you don't need to have the baby and this and that.
People can't change their mind, no doubt. I'm not proud to say this or admit this, but my situation somewhat. So literally, like when it came to my situation, like I definitely wanted to be a dad, but at the same time, um, there was too many issues. And so I knew me and my kid's mom wasn't gonna be together, and I didn't want to bring a child under those circumstances into the world. And so once she decided that she wanted to, I was at her mercy. And ever since then, I tried to be the best dad I could be. Life is a whole nother monster. And so I understand the perspective of bringing a child into this world. And so me not wanting to bring a child under those circumstances and doing that exactly solely because one person wanted to be selfish. And then in the process, be neglectful and resentful and tried to raise a child under those circumstances and won't even like allow, won't even proper co-parent out of vindictiveness, won't even allow me, and through brainwashing, won't even allow me to have a healthy relationship with my offspring. And so, at this point, my offspring is a lot older, so the choice ultimately is hers. And so, you know, when you hear some people explain themselves like they speak like victims, and I'm sure I've been guilty of that. And so, you want to have compassion for people, but at the same time, like the Bible does speak, how kids at the latter times they're gonna go against their parents, and so you know I also take that into consideration. I keep in mind the prodigal son, and so that door's always open. However, you know narratives, circumstances is a lot to consider, and so there's gonna be tribulation in the flesh. And even when you don't marry the person, what you're doing when you getting along with each other carnally, you're still in the flesh. So there's consequences in the sense of what? Now there's tribulation. That person could be long gone, and you still got to deal with the consequences of what that episode was. So me knowing this and knowing this at a greater capacity now that I'm older, if I was to embark on anything, me knowing, that's why like when I was like, yo, like if I'm gonna get in, if I'm gonna fuck around and get in that situation, then I know that. And so that's a lot to contend with. So it's important that I have my dominant understanding. And so you get to the point where the bitter truth is it's not worth the squeeze, and now nobody's happy. So how do we get things to where it's worth the squeeze?
What I think is unfair about that situation is that if a man is with a woman in a relationship and he actually wants a child and the woman does not, she can still do whatever she wants to do. And he cannot have any say. And so
Why?
even if it's
Because
the
the
opposite, it's just not
feminism,
fair. So,
the
I don't
poisoning
know. I
of
think I can
your
see how this is gonna
fucking
escalate
mind.
because
Like my body, my
again, this is my
choice.
personal opinion. I think,
Bullshit.
they both need to have more emotional intelligence, but I just think the woman in the blue is trying too hard to convince somebody her way of thinking. You can have a conversation and disagree and let that person see your side without trying to force them into having your side.
Saying that my outfit was really cute to saying I'm an effing idiot. That's so mean.
But I think that
You
your
did.
point of view is very obstructed, and I think that you just don't understand the magnitude of having a child.
Yeah, well, I'm not the one who admitted they would be okay with killing babies in foster care and children that have been
That's
abused.
not the point. What I'm saying.
That's really.
What's wrong with you? You have a
I need a second. Okay? I need a second. All I gotta say, like I said before, is welcome to New York. Okay? Welcome to New York. That was the quickest. I didn't anticipate it. I knew that it was gonna come at some point in the video. I didn't know it was coming right now. I didn't anticipate how quick that was gonna be. I didn't see it coming. I know the girl with the glasses didn't see it coming. The cameraman didn't see it coming. That was too swift. Okay, that was crazy. And unfortunately, when women behave like that, they feel that it's justified because she said something I didn't like. You can't do that. Okay? You are not allowed again, emotional maturity. You are not allowed to, because somebody said something you didn't like, put your hands on them. That is jail, prison, all kind of things. That's terrible. And again, when people who are on, this is why there's a hard time between people who are, for the people, and people who are more conservative with their thoughts, that they can't have a civil conversation. Because yeah, even though this one was trying to force you to have her opinion or whatever the case is, like, it should be able to be civil enough that the two of you can use your words, right? And even if you disagree or whatever the case, you can use your words to disagree. I don't see anything that warranted that woman putting her hands on her. I don't. Regardless of if she was forcing you to have your opinion, regardless of if you feel like it was antagonizing, what, I do not see what would have warranted that action. I don't. I don't see it.
Oh my god.
She attacked my wife.
Your wife just attacked me.
Imagine,
Why is that following me? Why you let me know?
This is New York, sir. I don't know what assistance you think you're going to get on the street from people, but that is the city of mind your business. Okay, so nobody's going to try to come to your aid, assist, whatever. They don't know what happened. Obviously, if that woman is a wild card with your wife, she might be a wild card with anybody. Okay, and nobody is going to risk their life or their sense of freedom to come and assist you in this situation. You're better luck, finding a cop if there's one around. Okay, because these people on the street do not care. They don't care. They probably saw it. They're gonna act like they didn't see it, and they're gonna move forward, regardless.
Why you following me?
I'm gonna get arrested. Look. Don't worry.
She just punched me in the face. We were just doing a street interview with my camera, and everything was fine for over 20 minutes or however long we were filming, and then she just punched me in the face. Oh my god.
Alright, so it's a couple other things, right? Yeah, let's go over here, right? Let's go over here. Now you hear it, you see it yourself. This is the females recognizing their own bullshit.
I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon.
Like, I must have been pranked. This must be a prank. Ashton Kutcher. There's no way. What do you mean? You had a couple months with. Listen, it might not look like it right now, but y'all can imagine, like, with me.
It would be best if we went our separate ways. And she's like, oh, okay. Hangs up. And she goes, oh, he found self-respect. I hate that. And then I was like, oh.
Now, mind you, you heard what she said right there? You heard what she said right there? Now, mind you, my bad. This is why it's not a good idea, right? To eat. Nah, but seriously though, mind you, I'm gonna wrap this up so I can enjoy this. But think about it for a second. Why is it that when a dude, let's just say like this, like Pete's game, like all of a sudden, like, you know what I mean, like, it's an issue. Like, what's the point of, you know what I mean, like, oh, you still want the benefits though, right? Or you went and did what you did, and now you want to come back, type of And yeah, that happens sometimes, and you know what I mean. I guess sometimes people get together and they stay forever after that, and sometimes it be a cycle, and then you regret doing it. So it's like I can't say to each his own. All I can say is that as a dude, ultimately, you gotta realize like as bad as she look, as so many good qualities that she have, and as much as you might want her in your life, you can't discount yourself. You can't, cause she'll be so quick to fucking treat you like a fucking car that just pulled off of the lot, and now your value just drops. And so it's like you don't want to be gassed up and thinking you are high value and all this sexual market nonsense. Like that shit is real ideologies that even if you don't subscribe to that shit, you gotta contend with. You know what I mean? You might not even be actively looking, and literally like chicks could be having an eye on you. You might not even be aware. You might not even know. You might not even be concerned or whatever the case is. But the fact that your name is, in certain mouths, and now it's causing this kind of commotion. Now all of a sudden, like dudes are like measuring themselves to you, and all kind of insecurities come out from it, and it's understandable, whatever the case is. The dating game is it's nothing that I want to even entertain, but I understand that we as people we got this need for companionship, and unfortunately we got it to the point where instead of approaching it in a healthy manner, you know, we perpetuate toxicity. And it has an adverse effect. And so you just got a lot of people out here that, for better or for worse, you know, they're being groomed for like singularity. And, you know, there's some benefits to being single, and then there's some benefits that, having um, companionship. Like, I took a long pause simply because, like, people, we ain't shit, but, like, literally, like, when you have that right kind of harmony, that right kind of, like, I don't want to just call it chemistry because I don't want to define it like that, but, like, when you have that right synergy in a relationship, that right, harmony where things are productive, like, it makes life not just productive, but, like, it just makes life better, man. Like, you know what I mean? It's not to get along with everybody, but like in the sense of like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's why we like team sports, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of other little side stories that come with that shit, but like at the end of the day, like, it's why we like teams. You know what I mean? And with that said, we're gonna wrap this video up right here, right now. Left y'all with some things. I was just freestyling. I don't know if I'm getting better. Hopefully I ain't getting worse. In the meantime, in between time, I don't know, man. I wish I had something clever to say, but I'll catch up with you.